They don't want you to think clearly, because if you did, even for 10 seconds, you'd walk away from everything that's been silently killing you. You wouldn't beg to be included. You wouldn't explain yourself to people who enjoy misunderstanding you. You wouldn't keep trading your peace for temporary praise or tearing your mind apart just to fit into a version of yourself that pleases others. You'd see the trap for what it is, an emotional maze designed to keep you distracted, obedient, predictable, and the moment you stepped back, the moment your mind grew quiet and sharp, you'd become dangerous, because clarity burns through manipulation. It tears the mask off false urgency, fake loyalty, and performative love. So ask yourself, how many of your decisions are truly yours? How many are inherited, demanded, expected? This isn't about thinking more, it's about thinking clean. That's the essence of Stoicism, not cold detachment, but disciplined truth. To strip away illusion until your thoughts belong to you again. If you're tired of living in reaction, of being ruled by noise, then this is where the shift begins. Also, consider subscribing for yourself. Let it be a quiet act of rebellion, a signal to your future self that you chose clarity over chaos, discipline over distraction, and a mind that no one else can quietly control. Most people believe they're thinking, when in reality, they're just reacting. The difference is subtle, but powerful. A real thought is intentional. It's built, shaped, examined, and owned. But reactions are fast, automatic, and almost always invisible. They wear the mask of thought, but underneath, they're just emotional echoes. Someone raises their voice, and suddenly you're defensive. A choice appears, and you feel the tight grip of anxiety, so you avoid it. You tell yourself you're being smart, cautious, strategic. But if you trace it back, that wasn't a decision. It was a triggered response, a flash of emotion pretending to be clarity. We live in a world that encourages speed, not depth. And in that speed, there's no room for pause. Everything is now urgent, loud. But clarity can't exist in chaos. Clear thinking doesn't rush. It steps back. It asks, where did that feeling come from? What am I assuming here? Most people never ask those questions. They never question the voice inside their head because they assume it's their own. But often it's not. It's the voice of a parent you tried to please, a crowd you feared, a belief you absorbed without consent, and without knowing it, your mind becomes a theater for everyone else's story, except your own. The Stoics taught that emotion isn't the problem. The problem is unexamined emotion. As Epictetus said, it's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them. That sentence holds a brutal kind of freedom, because if your judgment creates your suffering, then your clarity can destroy it. But first, you have to slow down enough to see what's really driving you. Most people never get there. They feel angry and assume someone else caused it. They feel ashamed and assume they deserve it. They feel anxious and assume there's something to fear. But every one of those emotions starts with a belief, and if the belief is faulty, the emotion is misleading. There's no clarity in that loop, only repetition, the same arguments, the same breakdowns, the same regrets. And still, people call it life. But if you don't know the root of your reactions, how can you ever say your choices are your own? Think about how many times you've made a decision just to avoid discomfort. How many things you've agreed to out of guilt. How often you've stayed silent, not because you agreed, but because your body feared disapproval. That's not choice. That's survival dressed up in manners. And over time, that habit becomes your personality. You're not calm. You've just trained yourself to suppress the fire. You're not indecisive. You've just learned to confuse discomfort with danger. So what does real thinking look like? It looks like tension, like resistance, like slowing down when everything else is speeding up. It's uncomfortable because clarity demands confrontation. You have to face yourself in the mirror, not the version that's socially acceptable, but the version that's still carrying old wounds, old fears, old programming. You have to become brutally honest about your own internal mechanisms. Why do certain people trigger you? Why do you avoid certain conversations? Why do you keep repeating the same cycles even when you know better? Clarity starts to form when you stop blaming the world for your reactions and start questioning their source. Not in a self-punishing way, but in a self-liberating way. Because the moment you realize that your reaction is not the final word, it's just the starting point, you start to take back control. You stop being a puppet for your own conditioning. You stop giving away power in every conversation, every argument, every decision. You stop letting feelings make choices for you. You begin to hold space between stimulus and response. And in that space, your mind becomes your own again. But clarity doesn't scream. It whispers. It asks you to observe without rushing to conclusion. It invites you to sit with discomfort long enough to see what it's made of. It shows you that the mind is not a battleground of emotions to conquer, but a terrain to understand. That's the Stoic path, not to eliminate feelings, but to see them clearly, to strip away the illusion that your first impulse is always right, because most of the time, it's not. Your first impulse is the loudest, but rarely the wisest. True thinking asks you to wait, to step back, to watch how your body tenses, your breath shortens, your thoughts race, and then, only then, to respond with intent, not reflex. This isn't easy work. It's hard to tell yourself the truth when your whole life has been built around avoiding it. But every time you choose awareness over autopilot, you build something unshakable inside you. You stop being the person who needs the world to change in order to find peace. You become the kind of person who carries clarity through chaos. And that kind of clarity is not just a mindset. It's a form of power, quiet, unassuming, but immovable. So the next time you feel the urge to react, to defend, to withdraw, to lash out, pause. Just for a moment. Ask yourself, is this mine? Or is this inherited? Is this truth? Or just a habit? That one moment of stillness could be the difference between repeating your past and creating your future. And that, more than anything, is what Stoic clarity offers. The power to respond, not just react. To choose, not just comply. To think, not just feel. And when you can do that consistently, your life stops being a collection of reactions and starts becoming a map you're actually directing. Because thinking clearly isn't just about making better choices. It's about becoming someone who doesn't need to be rescued from their own mind. And in a world full of noise, that's a rare kind of freedom. Watch closely, and you'll see it happen almost every day. Not out there, in here. You feel something, a pull, a spark, a rush of urgency. Maybe it's attraction, maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's excitement dressed up as destiny. But whatever it is, it hits first, fast, loud, and without even realizing it, your mind starts scrambling to make it make sense. You don't start with reason, you start with emotion, and reason comes limping in afterward, trying to justify the choice your body already made. It feels right, you tell yourself. It must mean something. But what if that feeling wasn't wisdom? What if it was just familiarity? And what if the familiarity was rooted in your oldest wounds? There's a strange comfort in what we already know, even if what we know is pain. You might find yourself drawn to people who remind you of your past, not because it's love, but because it's recognizable. You might feel urgency around an opportunity, not because it's right, but because you're scared of missing out. You think you're being intuitive, but you're actually being pulled by fear. And when fear leads, logic doesn't resist. It cooperates. It puts on a mask and tells you a story. A beautiful, reasonable, compelling story. One designed not to guide you, but to protect you from feeling the fear underneath. It happens in relationships. You feel seen by someone and call it connection. But maybe it's just relief. Relief that someone finally notices you, and so you cling, not because it's healthy, but because you've been starving. It happens in career decisions. You get an offer, and your stomach tightens. Not because it's aligned, but because it feels scarce. So you convince yourself it's your big break, when really it's your big panic. And if you look back honestly, most of your worst decisions didn't come from a lack of logic. They came from loyalty to a feeling you never paused to question. That's the danger of unexamined emotion. It drives the car while logic decorates the dashboard. You think you're in control, but you're really just narrating what your inner world already decided. And this isn't a flaw. It's not a character defect. It's just how the mind tries to survive. Emotion is ancient. It's fast, instinctive, protective. But when you build your life around its impulses, you become reactive instead of intentional. Most people live at the mercy of their emotional weather. They think if something feels intense, it must be important. If it hurts, it must be true. If it excites them, it must be a sign. But clarity doesn't work that way. Clarity doesn't follow emotion. It holds it still. It lets it speak, but it doesn't let it lead. When you think clearly, you become aware of the difference between what you want and what you're addicted to, between what feels familiar and what's actually good for you. And that awareness changes everything. You stop rushing to justify every emotional spike. You stop calling every pull a calling. You start recognizing that your brain can't always be trusted to tell you the truth in the moment, especially not when it's trying to avoid pain. You slow down. You wait for the feeling to settle. You ask yourself, if I wasn't feeling this, what would I know? And sometimes the answer is painful. You might see that what you thought was love was just validation, that what you called ambition was just comparison, that what you felt was urgency was just your fear trying to outrun itself. And this doesn't mean you become cold. It means you become free, free to feel without being ruled by feeling, free to notice emotion without obeying it. Because emotion isn't the enemy, it's information. It's just not the whole story. Like a spark, it can light a fire or burn down your house. The difference is whether or not you act before you think, before you pause, before you check in with what you truly value. Clarity asks for that pause. It creates space between the feeling and the follow-through. And in that space, you get to choose what kind of person you are. You might still feel afraid, but you won't let fear drive the decision. You might still feel drawn, but you'll ask what you're really being drawn to. You'll start to recognize the difference between desire and desperation, between intuition and impulse. And that awareness will feel like losing something, because it is. You're losing the illusion that feelings are facts. You're letting go of the story that says, if I feel it, it must be true. And that loss is the beginning of maturity. People will tell you to trust your gut. And sometimes, yes, your gut knows. But sometimes your gut is just your past in disguise. Sometimes your gut is just anxiety pretending to be wisdom. That's why you need more than feeling. You need philosophy. You need stillness. You need internal structure. Because without it, every strong emotion becomes a storm you can't navigate. But with it, you become someone who can feel deeply and still decide wisely. And that's the essence of Stoic clarity. Not to suppress emotion, but to observe it clearly without rushing to obey it. The Stoics didn't deny feeling, they just refused to be ruled by it. They practiced the pause. They trained themselves to separate the sensation from the story, so that when it came time to act, Their decisions were grounded, not in panic or pressure, but in purpose. That's the kind of clarity you build, not in a moment, but over time, by noticing the pattern, by catching yourself mid-justification, by asking gently, is this true, or is this just familiar? And the more you ask, the more power you gain. Not the kind of power that dominates others, the kind that anchors you, the kind that lets you move through chaos without being hijacked by every wave of emotion, the kind that sees clearly even when the feeling is loud, because you've learned something most people never do. Emotions are real, but they're not reliable, and until you can feel them without obeying them, you'll always be dancing to someone else's rhythm. But when you stop dancing, when you pause, feel, and choose, you become untouchable. You're no longer living in reaction. You're moving with quiet clarity, not because it feels good, but because it's right. And that difference, though invisible, is what transforms a reactive life into a deliberate one. It's what turns emotional noise into meaningful action. And over time, it's what makes your decisions not just smarter, but sacred. Most people think they're being careful when they wait. They believe the longer they hold off, the more clarity they'll gain. They don't realize that what they're really doing is waiting for certainty, a kind of perfection that doesn't exist outside their imagination. You hear it in the way they talk. I just need a little more time, or once I'm sure, I'll make the move. But underneath those words isn't wisdom. It's fear. And fear, when it wears the mask of logic, convinces you that hesitation is safety, that the unknown is always a threat, that until you see every possible outcome, you're not ready. But that's not clarity. That's a strategy to avoid commitment, a way to delay the discomfort of responsibility while feeling like you're doing something wise. The truth is, no one is ever completely ready, not for the big decisions, not for the hard conversations, not for the moments that demand growth. Readiness, in the way most people imagine it, is a myth. It's a mental loophole. You think you're buying time, but you're really trading momentum for illusion. And the longer you wait, the more your mind fills in the blanks with fear. You imagine the worst. You catastrophize. You play out every scenario that could go wrong. And soon, you're no longer standing still. You're stuck in a cycle of overthinking and underliving. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." The Stoics knew that the mind can be its own tormentor, that the pain we predict is often worse than the pain we'll ever experience. But certainty addicts don't know this yet. They think if they just wait long enough, the perfect moment will arrive. The path will clear, the fear will vanish. But it doesn't, because clarity doesn't come before action. It's born from it. You don't get clear and then move. You move and the fog starts to lift. That's what separates the Stoic mindset from the rest. It's not recklessness, it's respect for time. It's understanding that movement itself sharpens thought. When you engage with life, when you step into discomfort, when you make the call or take the risk, you don't become less clear, you become more aware. You learn what works and what doesn't. You feel where the resistance is and where it's just fear in disguise. And that feedback, real feedback, not imagined outcomes, is where clarity begins to form. But that requires courage, not the loud kind, the quiet kind that shows up without applause, the kind that says, even if I don't know everything, I know enough to begin. That shift in posture is what turns someone from passive observer to active participant in their own life. Because when you demand certainty before acting, you're not protecting yourself, you're holding yourself hostage. You're turning your own potential into a problem to be solved, instead of a path to be walked. The need for certainty kills momentum. It takes every spark of desire, every moment of insight, every whisper of intuition, and buries it under analysis. You start to question your own instinct. You doubt your timing. You seek external confirmation, hoping someone will give you permission to leap. But no one ever will, not fully. Because the clarity you're looking for isn't in someone else's approval. It's in your own movement, in the decision to act, knowing you might be wrong, but choosing to live anyway. That's not recklessness, that's responsibility, and that's where real strength is built. Not in the perfect decision, but in the willingness to bear the weight of your choice, to say, "This is mine, I chose it, I'll face what comes." That kind of ownership doesn't come from waiting. It comes from stepping in, fully present, fully aware that outcomes are uncertain, but your intent is clean. That's what Stoicism teaches, not to wait for the world to make sense, but to act in a way that brings your own sense to the world. You don't have to know exactly how it ends to begin. You don't have to have a map to take the first step. And you certainly don't need to silence all fear before moving forward. You just need to get honest about what's really holding you back. Is it wisdom or is it avoidance? Is it reflection or is it delay? Because most of the time, the longer you wait for clarity, the harder it becomes to act. The decision grows in your mind like a shadow, and shadows feed on time. The more you feed them, the darker they get. But when you move, when you decide, even without full certainty, you take away their power. You interrupt the pattern. You stop giving energy to a question that was never meant to be solved in theory, but lived in practice. And that shift changes everything, because you begin to trust yourself, not because you know all the answers, but because you're no longer afraid of being wrong. That's what makes your mind stronger, not perfection, but movement, not guarantees, but growth. And even if you fail, even if the decision leads to pain, it was still the right move. Why? Because you acted from alignment, not fear. And from that action, you learn something you couldn't have learned any other way, something alive, something earned, something real. And that reality, no matter how imperfect, will always be more useful than the fantasy of certainty. Clarity in the end isn't a feeling, it's a posture, a way of standing in your life that says, "I won't wait to be ready. I'll get ready by moving." It's not about always being right. It's about being willing to show up, to try, to adjust, to learn. And that willingness is the foundation of everything meaningful, because the person who needs every answer before they begin never begins. But the one who walks forward anyway, quietly, imperfectly, boldly, builds a life that's not only clear, but deeply lived. We live in the age of information, yet most of it leaves us more confused than empowered. There's no shortage of opinions, explanations, strategies, and stories. Scroll long enough and you'll find 1,000 ways to live, think, heal, win, grow, detach, love, let go, and then start all over again. It feels like wisdom, but it rarely changes anything. You listen to a podcast while you drive, swipe through advice threads during lunch, drown in the noise of other people's thinking. And by the end of the day, your head is full, but your direction is still foggy. Because clarity was never about how much you know. It's about knowing what to ignore. The truth is, most information isn't there to help you. It's there to keep you watching, scrolling, and wanting more. It plays on your curiosity, your insecurity, your need to feel like you're doing something just by learning something. But consumption is not clarity. In fact, if you're not careful, it becomes the very thing that blinds you. It dulls your instincts. You stop trusting your own voice because it gets buried under 100 other voices that sound more confident, more polished, more certain. And slowly, without meaning to, you hand over your inner compass to people who don't even know your terrain. Clarity doesn't get built in a storm of opinions. It gets built in silence, in the space between thoughts, where your own insights finally have room to rise. But we're taught to fear that silence. We fill it with noise, afraid that if we stop taking things in, we'll fall behind. But fall behind who? Behind what? The pursuit of constant input is often a disguised fear of decision-making. You keep gathering information because you're too afraid to act on what you already know. So you tell yourself you need more. Another voice, another viewpoint, another reason to delay. But if the information doesn't change your next action, it's just noise. And noise doesn't feel dangerous until it becomes normal, until the constant hum of distraction is so familiar that real thinking feels uncomfortable. You sit alone and your hand reaches for a device without even thinking. You feel uncertain and you open a new tab, looking for an answer. You feel pain and instead of facing it, you search for something to label it. Not to understand it, but to escape it. This isn't learning, it's avoidance with a sophisticated mask. Carl Jung warned us that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And endless information is one of the easiest ways to avoid, because it feels productive. You can convince yourself you're working on yourself, when really you're just looping, collecting philosophies like trophies, but never letting them transform you. Because transformation doesn't come from exposure, it comes from integration. And integration requires space, stillness, honesty, not with the world, but with yourself. You have to start filtering ruthlessly. Not everything deserves a place in your mind. Not every voice should have access to your inner world. You need boundaries not just in your relationships, but in your consumption. You wouldn't let a stranger walk into your house and rearrange your furniture. So why do you let random content rearrange your priorities, your beliefs, your emotional state? The most dangerous voice in your life isn't always the loudest. Sometimes it's the quiet influence of unexamined input, the video you didn't question, the post that subtly shifted your perspective, the conversation that planted doubt without you noticing. This is where discipline becomes more powerful than intelligence. It's easy to collect insights. It's hard to decide what deserves your attention. The Stoics understood this long before the digital age. They spoke of guarding the mind like a fortress, not just from attack, but from clutter, because clutter leads to confusion, and confusion over time leads to erosion. You don't lose yourself all at once. You lose yourself in pieces, one unchecked influence at a time, one distraction that turned into a habit, one article that seeded doubt, one piece of advice that sounded wise but led you away from what you already knew to be true. So start asking different questions. Not, is this interesting? Or, is this popular? But, does this help me move? Does this sharpen my next decision? Does this align with what I value? And if the answer is no, let it go. Not everything deserves a response. Not every topic deserves your curiosity. Some things are loud only because they want your energy, but clarity is quiet. It waits for those who are willing to tune out the chaos and come back to themselves. It's not about being closed-minded. It's about being intentional. Open-mindedness doesn't mean letting everything in. It means being open to truth and ruthless with everything else. It means knowing that you can't think clearly if your mind is constantly being pulled in 10 directions. You can't know your next step if every voice outside is telling you a different path. You can't feel your own intuition if it's drowned in content. And this is where true growth happens, not in the rush to consume, but in the discipline to discern, in the courage to say, I've heard enough. Now it's time to listen to myself. That's not arrogance, that's maturity. It's trusting that you don't need 100 opinions to make a single meaningful decision. You need presence, you need focus, you need space, because clarity isn't the result of information overload. It's what emerges when the noise fades, when the world goes quiet enough for your own wisdom to be heard. And if you want to live a life that reflects your values, your truth, your power, you have to protect that space like it matters, because it does. It's the foundation of every decision that shapes who you become. Clarity often feels like a mental problem, but it begins in a physical space. You can try every technique, journal your thoughts, listen to wisdom, and even seek silence. But if your environment is chaotic, your mind will reflect that chaos. You might think they're separate, your desk, your phone, your space, and then your thoughts, your moods, your decisions, but they're not separate. The environment you keep is the container for your mind, and if that container is filled with noise, mess, distraction, and stimulation, it becomes nearly impossible to access a quiet thought. The world outside becomes the blueprint for what happens inside. Look around, not just casually, really look. Are there papers everywhere, tabs open you haven't touched in days, half-written ideas scattered across apps and notebooks? That isn't just disorganization, that's mental friction. Each item is a tug, each notification is a leak, each reminder of an unfinished task pulls a little bit of your energy without asking permission. And over time this adds up. You don't even realize how much you're spending just trying to mentally push away the clutter. That's why so many people feel drained before they even begin. It's not that they're lazy, it's that their space is designed to exhaust them. And then, in the middle of all that, they try to make important decisions. They try to think clearly about their future, their relationships, their purpose. But the brain doesn't perform at its best in chaos. You wouldn't plan a battle strategy in a nightclub. You wouldn't write your will during an earthquake. Yet, people try to build their lives, quietly, deliberately, while surrounded by digital storms, crowded rooms, and scattered minds. It doesn't work. Not because they're incapable of clarity, but because clarity can't breathe in that environment. A Stoic protects their state. That doesn't mean you need absolute silence, a minimalist home, or to live in the mountains. It means you take responsibility for the atmosphere that surrounds your thoughts. You choose to guard it the same way you'd guard your time or your energy. You start to notice what you allow into your field, what lights are constantly flickering around you, what conversations you're listening to even when you're not talking, what energy lives in your space without your consent. Clarity doesn't need perfection, but it needs intention. When your environment is clean, not just in appearance but in energy, your thoughts stop rushing. You begin to feel the difference between what matters and what's simply urgent. The distinction becomes clearer between what you're being pulled into and what you are choosing. There's a kind of presence that returns, a stillness. Not the kind of stillness that's empty or numb, but the stillness that comes from alignment, the feeling of being in a space that supports your highest self, not fights against it. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." But here's the truth most people miss. You can't look inside properly when the outside is pulling at your sleeves. The inner world needs peace to open, and peace requires preparation, not in grand gestures, but in small, deliberate acts. Making your bed in the morning isn't just a chore, it's a signal. Closing unused tabs isn't just tidiness, it's clarity made visible. Turning your phone face down isn't just manners, it's self-respect. These small actions are not about being neat, they're about removing obstacles between you and your deepest thoughts. Most people underestimate how deeply space affects psyche. They think mental discipline alone will carry them, but the body is a gateway. When the eyes see clutter, the brain prepares for stress. When the ears hear constant pings and movement, the nervous system reacts as if it's under attack. You start the day already agitated, not because of a crisis, but because your system is overloaded with meaningless signals. The brain can only track so much, And if it's tracking noise, it can't track depth. That's why clarity often shows up after you've cleaned a room, taken a walk, or turned everything off. It's not magic, it's space. It's giving your thoughts room to echo and your intuition's room to rise. We're not built to be stimulated all day. We're not built to make sense of our lives in between dings and pop-ups and fragments of other people's thoughts. Clarity isn't found in more, it's found in less. Less distraction, less clutter, less noise, so that what remains can be felt fully. It's also about boundaries, not just physical ones, but energetic ones. Who are you letting into your space? What kind of conversations are happening around you? What do you tolerate in the name of politeness that leaves you scattered afterward? Your environment is not just objects, it's people, voices, and patterns. And the more you allow what drains you to stay near you, the harder it becomes to hear yourself. You're not weak for needing boundaries. You're wise for recognizing what dims your inner clarity. A clean environment is an act of self-honesty. It reflects that you're ready to stop letting life happen to you, that you're willing to create the conditions where your best self can show up. And it doesn't have to be dramatic. Start small, clean one corner, turn off one notification, cancel one unnecessary obligation. These little shifts are powerful. They create momentum. They send a message to your subconscious. I'm serious about this. And your mind will respond. It will begin to settle, to sharpen, to listen. The Stoics believed that the mind should not be ruled by circumstance, but they also understood that we must train the mind to withstand temptation, to resist indulgence, to return to the essential. That discipline begins where your body is, not later, not when everything's perfect, but right now, in the space you inhabit. Make it sacred, not through ritual, but through respect. Respect for your mind, respect for your peace, respect for your clarity. Because clarity isn't something you stumble upon, it's something you prepare for. It enters the room when there's space for it to sit down. And if you don't create that space, it won't shout. It won't fight the clutter. It will just leave quietly. So choose now to make room, to let your space reflect your intentions, to let your environment become a silent ally in your search for deeper thought. That's where clarity begins, not in your thoughts, but in the place where those thoughts are allowed to unfold. Most people don't know what they're optimizing for. They think they do. They say words like peace, freedom, love, meaning. But if you observe their actions, something doesn't add up. They say they want peace, but they never put down the chaos. They stay in relationships that drain them, jobs that agitate them, routines that offer no room to breathe. They say they want freedom, yet keep chasing the kind of approval that makes them a prisoner to everyone else's opinion. They say they want to feel whole, but they build their lives around the fragments, status, followers, attention, noise. They don't realize it, but their decisions already answer the question they never took time to ask. What am I really optimizing for? Because whether you're aware of it or not, you're always optimizing for something. Every choice you make is a vote in the direction of what matters most to you. Not what you say matters, what actually governs your choices. That's what makes this realization uncomfortable, because your outcomes don't contradict your values. They expose them. You think you're unlucky, distracted, stuck, but most of the time, you're just aligned with a priority you didn't mean to give power to. Maybe it's comfort, maybe it's recognition, maybe it's the illusion of control. You keep looping through the same situations, not because you're cursed, but because you're subconsciously loyal to a version of yourself that was built to survive, not thrive. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's what happens when you don't define your aim. Life starts aiming for you. And usually it aims low. It aims for quick highs, easy wins, safe roads, familiar traps. Not because you're incapable of more, but because the systems around you reward indecision. They give you distractions, so you never feel the need to sit with your own direction. You're nudged, guided, flooded with options, but never told to clarify the compass that should be driving all of it. So you get pulled instead of choosing. You end up chasing opportunities that sound good but feel wrong. You achieve things that impress people you don't even respect. You build momentum in a direction that makes you feel more lost, not less. This is the part where most people collapse. Not because they're weak, but because clarity demands honesty. And honesty can feel brutal when you've built a life around bypassing it. When you say you want peace but keep choosing environments that reward emotional chaos, something has to give. When you say you want love but keep choosing the kind of validation that feels more like performance than connection, you eventually run out of excuses. That tension isn't failure, it's feedback. It's your deeper self reminding you that the map you're following isn't aligned with the place you want to go. Clarity doesn't require that you get everything perfect. It requires that you get specific. What do you actually want your life to move toward, not just in moments of reflection, but in everyday action? Is it freedom? Then why are your habits wrapped in dependency? Is it strength? Then why are your boundaries built to please? Is it truth? Then why do you silence yourself to keep the peace? These aren't accusations, they're invitations. An honest life begins when you stop pretending the surface and the center are the same. It's not enough to want something, you have to protect it, you have to name it clearly and let it guide the hard choices. That's what it means to define what you're optimizing for, not in theory, but in practice. You look at the trade-offs you're willing to make. You accept that you can't serve everything at once. You can't prioritize comfort and growth at the same time. You can't chase acceptance and authenticity without feeling torn. You have to choose. And that choice will cost you, but it's the cost that makes it powerful. When your aim becomes singular, your mind starts to clean itself. The unnecessary starts to fall away. You stop negotiating with every new opinion. You stop trying to be good at everything. You stop saying yes just to be liked. You become more intentional, less apologetic. You start designing your life around the inner signal, not the external noise. And with that, the quality of your decision-making changes. You don't just ask, "What do I feel like doing?" You ask, "Does this move me toward what I truly want to embody?" That question breaks patterns. It keeps you from betraying yourself for short-term relief. It grounds you when distractions start to sparkle. It clarifies your values when everything around you blurs them. And clarity, once it takes root, makes your life simpler. Not easier, but simpler. You'll still face hard days, difficult people, setbacks, but you'll stop getting lost in them. Because even when the path is unclear, the direction isn't. You know what you're walking toward, and that knowledge changes your posture. It gives you something the world can't take from you: internal coherence. The Stoics believed in living according to nature, which meant living in alignment with your own rational, examined self. They didn't chase every impulse. They didn't optimize for fleeting highs. They optimized for virtue, for inner strength, for a life of integrity. That doesn't mean they were perfect. It means they chose to live by a compass they had tested. They knew what they were aiming for, so even in uncertainty, their movement was grounded. You need that same clarity, especially now when the world sells you 1,000 goals that look like success but feel like emptiness. Defining your aim is how you cut through that. It's how you resist being pulled into lives that don't belong to you. It's how you make peace with the fact that some things will have to be left behind, not because they're wrong, but because they're not aligned. And alignment is more valuable than abundance. It's not about having everything. It's about moving with focus, depth, and honesty every day in every choice. So pause and ask yourself, not abstractly but practically, what are you really optimizing for? When you speak, when you choose, when you commit, what sits beneath that? If it's unclear, don't panic, just listen. Clarity doesn't shout. It waits. It emerges slowly as you peel away the noise. But once it arrives, you'll feel it. You'll recognize the quiet conviction it brings. You'll stop trying to be everything and start becoming something. Not all at once, but steadily, in a way that lasts. There's a quiet danger in indecision. It doesn't look like fear. It looks like flexibility. It wears the mask of patience, of wisdom, of being open. You've heard it before. Stay open. Keep your options alive. Don't rush into anything. And yes, in certain moments that can be good advice. But repeated often enough, applied too broadly, it becomes a strategy for avoidance. Not choosing feels safe because it postpones the discomfort of regret. But here's the truth. Indecision isn't wisdom. It's fear with a softer voice. You tell yourself you're taking your time, but really you're hoping life will decide for you, that some perfect sign will come, that something outside you will make the uncomfortable choice you're afraid to make inside. But life doesn't work that way. It rewards movement, not hesitation, direction, not drifting. The person who hesitates too long begins to confuse stillness with safety. But drifting isn't peace, it's erosion. Bit by bit, your confidence wears away. You second-guess even the small things, and over time, you become someone who waits for clarity, for confirmation, for certainty, and forgets what it means to act from the core. Clarity doesn't come from floating. It comes from choosing, from making a decision and meeting what follows with courage. A decisive mistake will teach you more than endless speculation ever will. But we avoid that mistake, don't we? Because being wrong feels like failure. It hurts the ego. It makes you question your judgment. And yet, indecision carries a cost of its own, a quieter, longer-lasting kind. The kind where days pass and nothing changes. The kind where years go by and you're still wondering, still weighing, still waiting. That's not caution. That's avoidance wrapped in the language of reason. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "A wrongdoer is often the man who has left something undone, not always he who has done something." That's a powerful reversal. We're so afraid of doing the wrong thing, but we rarely fear the weight of what we didn't do, the words we didn't say, the moves we never made, the ideas we let die before they were born. And what's worse, those losses don't scream. They don't break like bad decisions do. They fade quietly into the background. And suddenly, your life isn't built on choices, it's built on omissions. Things that never happened because you told yourself it wasn't the right time. And we justify it with such noble phrases. "I'm being wise. I'm just not sure yet." But dig deeper and you'll usually find fear. Fear of being judged. Fear of closing a door. Fear of failure, of course. But also fear of identity shift. Because the moment you choose, you define yourself. You leave something behind. And that finality scares us. So we delay. We say yes and no at the same time. We live in the middle, half-hearted, half-present, half-alive. But you don't grow there. You grow at the edge, where decisions demand you to be seen, where you commit to something, even knowing it might not work. Because that's where your clarity sharpens. Not before the choice, but after it. Movement brings contrast. It shows you the terrain. You step forward, and the fog begins to lift. And even if it turns out to be the wrong path, at least now you know. You're not wondering anymore. You're learning. You're adapting. You're becoming someone who moves. That movement doesn't have to be loud or bold. It doesn't have to change your whole life overnight. But it does have to be yours. Chosen, owned, clear. Because the more you practice choosing, the stronger your discernment becomes. You stop needing everyone else's opinions. You stop needing to feel ready. You start trusting that clarity isn't a destination, it's a result of walking with intent. Carl Jung believed that indecision often came from a split inside the psyche, a conflict between two opposing desires or fears, the part of you that wants to be seen and the part of you that wants to stay safe, the part of you that longs for transformation and the part that clings to the comfort of who you've always been. This internal tension isn't a flaw, it's part of being human. But if you don't resolve it through conscious choice, it will quietly rule you from the shadows. You'll keep saying maybe when your soul is screaming for a yes or a no. So don't glorify indecision. Don't mistake delay for depth. Real depth comes from showing up with your full weight, from saying, I don't know how this ends, but I choose this anyway, and then allowing whatever follows to shape you. That's how strength is built. Not by knowing the future, but by being willing to meet it on your own terms. And yes, you might make mistakes. You might change your mind. That's part of the process. But indecision isn't neutral. It costs energy. It drains focus. It keeps your attention divided. You can't be present in your current path if your mind is still negotiating another. Decision creates closure, and closure creates peace. Not always comfort, but peace. A kind of internal stillness that says, this is the way I'm going. And that stillness is where real clarity lives. So if you've been floating, come back to the ground. Choose, not recklessly but bravely. Listen to your resistance, but don't let it decide. Hear your fear, but don't let it write the script. Define your values, check your direction, and then move. Because waiting for the perfect moment is the most seductive trap of all. It makes you feel like you're being wise, when really you're just being delayed. Let your clarity come from motion. Let your confidence come from action. And let your strength come not from never doubting, but from no longer needing to avoid doubt to make a move. That's how decisive people are built. Not from being certain, but from being willing. And the more willing you become, the less power fear has to keep you still. Most people don't realize how often they choose what's easy over what's meaningful. Not because they lack depth or vision, but because the world constantly hands them options designed to distract. Paths are presented, offers are made, people show interest. And because something is available, because it's already in front of them, they assume it must be worth pursuing. But availability doesn't mean alignment. Just because something is within reach doesn't mean it's right for you. Just because someone wants you doesn't mean they're good for your soul. Just because a door opens doesn't mean you were meant to walk through it. We chase what's easy to access, what's immediately rewarding, what saves us from sitting in uncertainty. But in doing so, we lose the ability to wait, to pause, to discern. We forget how to choose deliberately, and slowly our lives become filled with what was convenient, not what was true. You end up in relationships that were easy to fall into, but hard to grow in. You take jobs that pay enough to keep you busy, but not enough to make you feel alive. You fill your calendar with obligations you never consciously chose, all because they were offered, not because they were aligned. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But that privilege is lost the moment you start building your identity on what's available rather than what's authentic. When your direction is dictated by what happens to be nearby, you become a passive character in your own story. You adapt to other people's timelines, other people's expectations, other people's definitions of success. And what's worse, you start to believe that this is what you wanted. You stop questioning if the life you're living is actually yours. A Stoic doesn't operate this way. A Stoic doesn't make decisions based on convenience. They're not seduced by urgency or flattery or trends. They choose what is necessary, not what's shiny, not what's praised, but what's aligned with the kind of character they're trying to build. Because they know that the things that matter most often arrive slowly. They require patience, commitment, and clarity. And if your mind is constantly reacting to what's placed in front of you, you won't have the presence to see what actually belongs to you. This is where self-discipline becomes a form of self-respect. When you no longer say yes just because something's easy. When you no longer pursue something simply because it's possible. Instead, you start to filter life differently. You ask, does this fit the direction I'm choosing? Does this reflect the values I claim to hold? And more often than not, the answer will be no. That's not a failure. That's growth. Growth often looks like not moving, like holding your ground when everything around you is trying to pull you somewhere else. Saying no is one of the most powerful things you can learn. Not in a defensive way, but in a grounded one. No to the wrong relationship. No to the tempting shortcut. No to the quick fix that would only distract you from the deeper work. Because every yes is a cost. And if you don't track that cost, you'll spend your time and energy on things that feel full in the moment, but leave you empty afterward. The point isn't to reject everything. It's to become someone who doesn't confuse availability with destiny. The more aligned you become, the more you'll be misunderstood by those who still chase everything that shines. That's okay. You're not here to gather what everyone else wants. You're here to build what only you can carry. And sometimes that means slowing down. That means watching opportunities pass without grasping. That means letting go of good enough so you're not too full to receive what's truly yours. Clarity thrives in spaces where patience lives, but our world is allergic to stillness. We're told that if we're not chasing something, we're falling behind. That if we're not constantly reaching, we're wasting time. But reaching isn't the same as progressing. You can be busy your whole life and still end up nowhere meaningful. Movement doesn't always mean momentum. Sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all. Stillness isn't stagnation, it's restraint. It's the refusal to let life drag you by the wrist. It's the decision to let your inner standard, not external supply, decide your direction. And that kind of stillness requires strength. It requires you to sit with discomfort instead of rushing to fix it. To trust that alignment is worth waiting for. To believe that the right things will find you when you've created enough space for them to land. That's the shift. From grabbing at what's there to choosing what fits. From being pulled by availability to being led by integrity. From reacting to every offer to responding only to what calls something deeper in you. And the more you live this way, the more natural it becomes. You stop seeking so much and start seeing more. You begin to notice that many of the things you chased never truly nourished you. That the things that looked like opportunities were often just distractions in disguise. And eventually something beautiful happens. You stop needing life to constantly impress you. You stop needing to be constantly entertained or validated. You begin to enjoy the quiet. You start to trust your own pace. You learn to wait, not with anxiety, but with calm awareness. Because now you're not waiting for something to fill the void. You're waiting because you know your aim is clear. You're not empty. You're ready. There's a difference. The Stoic way is not about denial. It's about discipline. About choosing not what's in front of you, but what's in line with you. That means letting go of what's available so you can make room for what's aligned. And that's not a once-in-a-while decision, it's a daily practice, a habit of saying, just because I can doesn't mean I should. A commitment to yourself that you will not sell your peace for proximity, that you will not trade your path for what happens to show up uninvited. You are not here to chase everything. You are here to choose wisely. And choosing wisely often starts with the courage to do nothing when nothing fits, because that space you protect becomes the foundation of a life you actually want to live, not a life made of whatever was nearby, a life made of what was true. And in that truth, clarity finally begins to take root. Quiet, strong, unshakable. Clarity isn't just about making better choices. It's about understanding the landscape in which those choices unfold. It's not enough to ask, "What should I do?" because that question lives in isolation. Real clarity asks, "What system am I operating inside? What game is being played here? And more importantly, who benefits if I act without thinking?" When you're caught in a reactive loop, it always feels personal. Someone insults you, and your pride flares. A sudden change catches you off guard, and panic takes the wheel. But step back just far enough, and you'll see something critical. Reactions are often exactly what someone else is hoping for. This is where power gets subtle, not through force, but through framing. If someone can't control your actions directly, the next best thing is to control the context in which you act. They don't need to tell you what to do. They just need to shape the moment so you make their desired move for them. They need you impulsive. They need you defensive. They need you to take the bait. Because once you do, your clarity dissolves and your power is handed over. Not because you weren't smart enough, but because the frame had already been set before you entered the scene. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And that includes projecting their own chaos onto you. Not consciously maybe, but energetically. People frame situations to pull you into their mess, their pace, their urgency. If you're not careful, their lack of clarity becomes your responsibility. Their fear becomes your confusion. Their manipulation becomes your mistake. And all of it started because you didn't stop to ask, whose frame am I operating inside right now? You see it everywhere. In arguments when someone tries to define the terms before you even speak. In business, when you're pressured into a decision before the deal disappears. In relationships, when silence is weaponized and timing is used to shift power. These aren't just dynamics. They're frames. Invisible structures that dictate how you think, feel, and respond, unless you take the pause to recognize them. Because until you recognize the frame, you're not thinking inside your own mind. You're thinking inside someone else's design. But the moment you see the frame, you interrupt the manipulation. You step outside of it, and instead of reacting, you observe. You ask not just, "What am I being told?" but "Why am I being told it this way? And what do they gain if I believe it?" That's the power of meta-awareness. It gives you space to choose without being pushed. And from that space, you reclaim authorship over your own narrative. This isn't about becoming paranoid or mistrustful. It's about becoming strategic. It's understanding that the loudest voices don't always come from truth. They come from leverage. People will pressure you to act quickly, to prove something, to defend yourself. But urgency is often a tool, not a truth. It's designed to rob you of clarity by hijacking your nervous system. That's why one of the clearest moves you can make isn't an action, it's a pause. A moment where you mentally step outside the frame and examine it before you move. Because the truth is, when you rush, you rarely act from alignment, you act from pressure. And pressure is rarely neutral. Someone always benefits from it. The question is it you? And if the answer is no, then it's not a situation demanding action, it's a trap demanding awareness. This one shift in thinking changes everything. You no longer ask, "What's the right answer?" You ask, "Whose terms am I trying to answer this on?" And sometimes, the most powerful decision you can make is to refuse the question altogether, to change the rules, to reset the frame before you respond. Marcus Aurelius practiced this constantly. In his private writings, he would remind himself that the opinions and judgments of others were merely noise, external shadows that couldn't touch his inner reason unless he allowed them to. That inner fortress, that clear mental ground, is where clarity is built. Not just by thinking hard, but by thinking differently, by zooming out from the immediate stimulus and remembering the long game. Who do I want to be in this moment, and who benefits if I forget? And sometimes it's not even another person framing you, it's your past, your conditioning, your fear of being misunderstood, rejected, unloved. Those old scripts will whisper at the exact moment you need clarity. They'll say, prove them wrong. Say something now. Don't lose your chance. And if you don't question them, you act them out. Not because they're true, but because they've been rehearsed in your nervous system for years. That's why clarity isn't just an intellectual exercise, it's a practice of mental freedom. It's the ability to interrupt your own autopilot, to challenge the frame not just outside you, but within you. To say, just because this feels urgent doesn't mean it is. Just because this looks familiar doesn't mean it's right. Just because I'm being told to choose now doesn't mean I need to. This kind of self-command doesn't make you cold. It makes you calm. It doesn't make you indecisive. It makes you deliberate. And over time, it gives you a quiet edge. Because while others are scrambling to respond, to defend, to prove, you're watching the board. You're moving from clarity, not from panic. And in a world that's addicted to reaction, that kind of poise becomes rare and powerfully effective. The strongest minds aren't just the ones with the best answers. They're the ones who can slow down long enough to question the question itself, who understand that every situation comes with invisible strings attached, and that sometimes clarity means not cutting the string, but seeing who's holding it. So before you speak, before you act, before you decide, take that extra breath. Ask not just, what do I want, but what's being set up here? Who wins if I rush? What happens if I don't bite the bait? Because that moment of awareness is where your freedom lives, not in avoiding all conflict, but in refusing to be played. Clarity is the art of seeing beyond the surface, of holding your center when the world tries to shake it. And it's not about winning every situation, it's about not losing yourself in them. That's the real frame worth protecting. The frame of a mind that thinks before it moves, that watches before it speaks, that knows when silence is power and when action is freedom. Not because it's smarter, but because it's sovereign. And in that sovereignty, clarity becomes your default, not your exception. Most people hesitate before a big decision because they're afraid of making the wrong move. They picture the embarrassment, the loss, the chaos that might follow. And so they wait. They stall. They tell themselves, I just need a little more time. But while they're evaluating the risk of action, they almost never calculate the price of inaction. What is the cost of doing nothing? What begins to decay in the silence? What opportunity fades out of view while you hesitate, convincing yourself it's wisdom when it's really fear in disguise? The mind has a strange bias. It exaggerates the weight of stepping forward while completely downplaying the toll of standing still. You might spend days, weeks, months analyzing every move you could make, but rarely do we turn that same intensity inward and ask, what happens if I keep avoiding this? What if nothing changes, not just for today, but for years? And if that question doesn't chill you, maybe it should. Because time doesn't stand still while we hesitate. It keeps moving, and often the greatest damage in life isn't caused by the things we do, it's by the things we let slide, by the silence we justify, by the potential we bury while pretending it'll dig itself out later. This is where the Stoics had it right. They weren't about obsessing over worst-case scenarios just for the sake of anxiety. They practiced something deeper. They called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Not to catastrophize, but to prepare. To run simulations in the mind, not of what success looks like, but of what decay looks like if you ignore what must be done. It's not about being pessimistic, it's about being honest. To look clearly at the truth of what happens if you let fear set the pace of your life. If you let indecision rot away the structure of who you're becoming. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." He wasn't talking about partying or distractions. He was pointing to something more dangerous, wasting time through mental passivity, through waiting for life to sort itself out. But life doesn't hand you clarity like a gift. It reveals itself only through forward motion, and the longer you sit in pause, the more your confidence corrodes. Not because you're incapable, but because clarity is tied to momentum. Every day you avoid the decision, it becomes heavier, not lighter. We imagine that avoiding the hard conversation will keep the peace, that ignoring the gut feeling will somehow buy us more time. But peace bought through avoidance is rented, not owned. And sooner or later, the payment comes due, often in the form of regret. Not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet, daily erosion of knowing you didn't move when you should have. That you let something important slide just a little too long, and now it's out of reach. Carl Jung said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." That avoidance has a cost. It doesn't freeze the problem in place, it feeds it. Silence becomes the soil in which your doubts grow roots. Hesitation becomes the invitation for lesser priorities to take over. And while your higher self waits at the threshold, life moves on without it. Not as a punishment, but as a consequence. You don't need to become someone who always rushes. That's not the point. The point is learning to simulate not just the danger of movement, but the danger of staying still. To ask yourself honestly, what decays when I delay? What do I give permission to grow simply by not addressing it? And what kind of person am I becoming by doing nothing at all? Sometimes clarity doesn't feel like a breakthrough. It feels like a reckoning, like realizing that your avoidance wasn't neutral. It was shaping your life in the background, and the weight you thought you were avoiding was just shifting to another part of your soul, one that eventually starts to whisper in moments of stillness. You know what you should have done. But here's the thing. Once you see that clearly, you gain power, because now you can begin to choose your discomfort wisely. The discomfort of the hard conversation, or the discomfort of silence. The discomfort of the risk, or the discomfort of watching time erase your potential. There is no path without weight. There is only the question of which weight you want to carry, and which will break you over time if you pretend it isn't there. The sharpest minds don't just think about what could go right. They also calculate the corrosion of avoidance. They imagine what kind of self they become if they keep delaying, keep suppressing, keep hoping clarity will arrive before they act. But clarity, in its real form, is often the result of action, not the prerequisite. It comes not when you know everything, but when you've moved through the fog long enough to understand what matters. So don't ask only, "What will happen if I do this?" Also ask, "What will happen if I don't?" Let that second question ring loud in your decisions. Let it remind you that stillness can be a weapon when chosen, but a prison when defaulted to. Let it remind you that silence can be sacred, but also suffocating when it becomes the shield behind which you hide your truth. You're not here to avoid all pain. You're here to pick the pain that leads to growth, to pick the discomfort that sharpens you, and to remember that while most people live as if they have endless time, clarity begins the moment you understand how little of it you truly control. That's the gift of premeditatio malorum. Not fear, but foresight. Not anxiety, but strength. Not waiting for regret to teach you, but preparing your mind so regret has no room to grow. So the next time you're hesitating, take a moment. Picture who you become if you do nothing. Picture the conversation that never happens, the decision that never gets made, the dream that never breathes. And then ask yourself, not just what you're afraid of doing, but what you're afraid of not becoming. Because in the end, clarity isn't just about what you see. It's about what you're willing to face. And sometimes, the clearest thing you can do is stop waiting for the moment to be perfect and start moving before the cost of stillness becomes permanent. We grow up collecting ideas like pebbles, small enough to carry, smooth enough to accept without question. You're told to be kind, so you nod and absorb it. You're told forgiveness is a virtue, so you wear it like armor. You're told that putting yourself first is wrong, even shameful. And eventually those beliefs become background noise, so constant, so familiar, you forget to ask where they came from. But clarity isn't just about what you think, it's about why you think it. So much of what we call our values aren't truly ours. They're borrowed, inherited, rewarded into us. You act a certain way and someone claps. You question something and someone frowns. And slowly, silently, you adapt, not to truth, but to approval. What you end up with isn't conviction, it's conditioning, not a compass, but a leash. That's where the real distortion begins. Because now every decision you make, every line you draw, every boundary you don't set, gets filtered through a belief you never questioned. Be kind, they say. But kind to who? And at what cost? Always forgive. But does that include those who never acknowledged what they did? Don't be selfish. But what if the only way to grow is to finally put yourself first? The world loves to shape you with these ideas, not because they serve you, but because they make you easier to manage. This is why the Stoics didn't just focus on action. They focused on inner auditing. They believed in stripping away every idea that wasn't grounded in reason. Epictetus said, "Don't just say you have read books. Show that through them you have learned to think differently." In other words, don't just inherit beliefs, dissect them, challenge them, interrogate their origin like you're the only one responsible for your mind. Because you are. Carl Jung took this even deeper. He warned us that most of our so-called morality isn't chosen, it's absorbed from the collective, from parents, teachers, religious leaders, even advertisements. And once it's inside you, it speaks in your own voice. That's what makes it so dangerous. The idea that doesn't serve you still feels like your own thought. But it isn't. It's a parasite dressed up as wisdom. And unless you slow down and ask, where did this belief come from? Who does it serve? You'll keep living your life as a reaction to someone else's design. Sometimes the most powerful question you can ask is simply, who benefits from me believing this? Who benefits if I never speak up? Who benefits if I constantly suppress my needs? Who benefits if I spend my life over-apologizing for existing? Often, the answer isn't noble, it's strategic. Someone somewhere profits from your confusion, from your guilt, from your silence. And the longer you let that voice go unchallenged, the deeper it roots itself in your choices. Clarity begins when you realize that even noble-sounding beliefs can be used as tools of control. Be humble can be twisted into stay small. Forgive can become tolerate abuse. Love unconditionally can mutate into accept mistreatment. The words stay the same, but their function shifts depending on the hands that hold them. This is why your inner audit must be ruthless. Not cynical, but precise. Not hateful, but discerning. You're not rebelling by questioning the ideas you were given. You're returning to yourself. You're saying, I will no longer carry beliefs that ask me to betray my own sanity. I will not call it virtue to abandon myself. I will not call it morality to tolerate the intolerable. And I will not call it kindness if it robs me of clarity. That's the shift. You stop being the echo of your environment and start becoming the architect of your mind. You choose your values the way a craftsman chooses tools, not because they were handed down, but because they are sharp, honest, and necessary. And when you do that, everything changes. Suddenly, you're no longer exhausted by trying to live up to ideas that never fit you. You're no longer pulled in 10 directions by guilt that was never yours to carry. You start to speak clearer, stand taller, say no without shame. Because now, your life isn't built on borrowed slogans. It's rooted in examined truth. You still choose to be kind, but not when it costs your voice. You still forgive, but not when it means denying your pain. You still care, but it's not performative. It's not because someone once told you that your worth depended on how small you could make yourself. This is what it means to take authorship of your beliefs. Not to reject everything, but to re-choose it, with your eyes open, with your strength intact, with your clarity unshaken. So the next time you feel that inner pressure, that soft, familiar guilt trying to steer your decisions, pause, ask, is this mine? Did I choose this belief with clarity? Or did I inherit it because it made someone else more comfortable? You owe it to yourself to live by a mind that is truly yours. Because the alternative is to spend your life walking paths you didn't choose, defending values you didn't examine, and sacrificing peace for approval that never lasts. Clarity doesn't always arrive like a light. Sometimes it shows up as a question that burns through the fog, and when it does, don't run from it. Sit with it. Let it pull apart the old stories. Let it untangle the voices, and let it make room for something real, something you chose with full awareness. Because in the end, nothing is more dangerous than a belief you didn't know was planted. And nothing is more powerful than a mind that questions everything, until only the truth remains. We live in a world where thinking is often mistaken for doing. People sit in coffee shops with journals full of goals, mind maps, reflections, color-coded life plans. They listen to 5 podcasts a week about productivity and self-mastery. They reflect endlessly, analyze every emotion, break every interaction into 1,000 angles, trying to solve life like a math equation. And yet, despite all this mental gymnastics, nothing changes. They still hesitate, still doubt, still feel stuck. Why? Because clarity without action is just another form of delusion. The overthinker wears clarity like a costume. They believe that understanding the path is the same as walking it, but clarity in thought is only the beginning. True transformation requires clarity in motion, and that's a whole different beast. Thinking happens in comfort. Action demands discomfort. It asks you to be exposed, to risk failure, to confront resistance, not just in the world, but within yourself. You can convince yourself that you're progressing just because your thoughts sound smarter, but until your feet move, your life doesn't. That's where so many get trapped. In the illusion that more reflection leads to more clarity. But there comes a point when your reflections become rehearsals for avoidance. You keep dissecting the same idea, revisiting the same hesitation, looping around the same decision, and each loop makes the fear a little stronger and the will a little weaker. You don't need another mental model, you need movement. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." There's a silent but profound gap between the self you imagine and the self you live as. And the longer that gap exists, the more anxious, resentful, and fragmented you feel. Clarity of mind must be tested by the reality of experience. Otherwise, it just stays theory, pretty, polished, and powerless. What's stopping most people isn't confusion. It's fear wearing the mask of analysis. It's perfectionism disguised as preparation. You tell yourself you're not ready because you want to be sure. You want to avoid mistakes. But clarity doesn't guarantee correctness. It's not about predicting the perfect outcome. It's about aligning with your values, your priorities, your direction, and then moving forward in integrity with those. There's a strange freedom that comes when you stop needing every decision to be flawless, when you let go of the illusion that mistakes will ruin you. In truth, it's stagnation that erodes you, not movement. You can course correct once you're in motion, but you can't correct a path you never started. The only real mistake is letting the desire for certainty keep you frozen in thought. Sometimes, the most powerful act of clarity is a step into the unknown, a step that might be wrong, might be awkward, might even fail, but it breaks the pattern. It shifts you from passive observer to active participant in your own life. You stop being a critic of your possibilities and start being a builder of them. That's where confidence comes from, not from knowing everything, but from knowing you'll respond, adjust, and grow regardless of the outcome. Even the Stoics knew this. They weren't passive philosophers. They were doers, warriors, statesmen. Marcus Aurelius wrote, not to theorize, but to remind himself to act, to endure, to be just. The mind wasn't a place to hide, it was a place to prepare. But the battlefield of life was always out there, in reality, not in rumination. There's an honesty that emerges when you take action. You stop speculating about who you are and start proving it. You stop guessing what matters and start discovering it. Every decision you make sharpens your clarity. Every misstep teaches you something your thoughts never could. And slowly, through experience, you build a self that's not just aware, but embodied. This is the trap, the belief that a little more thought will finally make you fearless. It won't. The only thing that makes fear lose power is motion. Clarity that leads nowhere is just another way to stay safe, to stay comfortable, to stay small. But your life wasn't meant to be lived in the waiting room of your own mind. You'll never think your way into a different reality. You have to move, say the words, set the boundary, apply for the job, end the cycle, start the project, tell the truth, show up even when your hands shake. And if it goes wrong, so what? You learned, you grew. You now stand one level higher in your understanding, not because you thought more, but because you acted anyway. Thinking clearly is powerful, but acting clearly is transformative. It takes courage to translate what you know into what you do, to align your inner world with your outer behavior, to risk imperfection for the sake of integrity. That's where real clarity lives, not in pristine thoughts, but in purposeful action. So if you've been thinking for days, weeks, maybe even years, about a change you know you need to make, consider this. The clearest thought in the world is worthless if it never leaves your head. Don't let your wisdom rot in the dark. Bring it to life, even if it trembles, even if it stumbles, even if you're not sure it's perfect. Because the truth is, clarity deepens after you move. The fog clears when you walk through it, not when you wait for it to disappear. A thinker can explain the path, but only a doer can walk it, and only a walker becomes free. In the end, clarity is not just about how well you think, it's about how deeply you live. So stop waiting, start becoming, and let your actions speak the truth your mind already knows. Pain has a way of showing up right when we think we've figured things out. It interrupts, it embarrasses, it strips us of our sense of control. And in that raw discomfort, most people reach for distraction, denial, or numbing. They treat pain like a glitch, something to escape as fast as possible. But clarity, real clarity, doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from integrating it, from looking it dead in the eye and asking, "What are you trying to teach me?" Most people survive their pain without ever studying it. They go through heartbreak, failure, rejection, but they don't digest those experiences. They don't extract the truth embedded in them. They move on quickly, hoping the next chapter won't sting as badly. But a wound unexamined is a lesson repeated. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Pain that isn't understood doesn't go away, it just hides. It seeps into your decisions, it echoes in your relationships, it shapes your future without your awareness. There's a quiet power in turning toward what hurt you, not to relive it, not to wallow in it, but to study it like data, like feedback from life itself. When someone rejects you, it might sting, but underneath that sting is a signal. Maybe it points to a pattern you haven't noticed. Maybe it reveals a deeper wound that's been driving your behavior. Maybe it simply reminds you that your worth was never supposed to be outsourced in the first place. Either way, rejection becomes information, not identity. The same goes for failure. Most people avoid it at all costs, but failure, when studied without ego, is one of the greatest clarifiers. It strips away the illusions. It shows you what doesn't work. It forces you to confront assumptions you never thought to question. And that's why Stoics didn't run from suffering. They used it. They turned it into fuel. They saw mistakes not as evidence of inadequacy, but as a necessary part of refinement. The modern world teaches us to curate our image, to always appear like we're winning. But clarity doesn't come from performance. It comes from reflection. It's not about how flawless you look. It's about how honest you are about what's broken. And here's the twist. The more you face your pain directly, the less power it holds over you. What once triggered shame becomes a symbol of strength. What once brought silence now speaks wisdom. You don't need to broadcast your pain. You just need to stop hiding it from yourself. Integrating pain doesn't mean romanticizing it. It means using it. It means recognizing that your past wounds don't disqualify you from growth. They're part of the reason you're able to grow at all. A scar is not a weakness. It's evidence of healing, evidence that you survived. But surviving isn't enough. You must understand what you survived and why. This is where emotional maturity begins. Not in pretending you've never been hurt, but in no longer being owned by the hurt. You can acknowledge betrayal without becoming bitter. You can feel disappointment without giving up. You can carry your pain without infecting others with it. That's strength, not the absence of emotion, but the integration of it. Seneca once said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body," and he meant it. When you stop seeing pain as a detour and start seeing it as part of the path, everything changes. You stop being afraid of discomfort. You stop flinching every time life challenges your illusions, and instead you start listening, watching, learning. Pain will always knock on the door. You can't live a full life without it, but you get to decide what role it plays. Will it control your choices from the shadows, or will it become something sacred, something you've earned the right to carry with grace? Clarity deepens every time you extract a principle from your past. When you ask, what did that experience reveal about me? Not just what happened, but how you reacted, what it triggered, what it exposed. The past is a mirror, not a cage, but only if you dare to look into it without flinching. And when you do, when you stop trying to erase your wounds and instead build with them, something powerful happens. You become less reactive, less desperate for validation, less afraid of endings, because you've already met pain and you've learned how to speak its language. You've turned it from an intruder into a teacher, and in doing so, you become something solid, someone who bends but doesn't break. There's a kind of quiet dignity in someone who's faced pain and stayed soft. Someone who's been disappointed but hasn't closed off. Someone who carries memories that still sting but doesn't let them poison the present. That's the work. Not pretending pain doesn't exist, but making sure it's integrated into who you are, not buried underneath who you're trying to be. This isn't easy. It takes time. It takes silence. It takes honesty, the kind that makes your chest tighten. But it's worth it, because when you do the inner excavation, when you pull those old wounds into the light, you finally stop being controlled by them. You don't need to keep proving you're strong. You just are. So next time life knocks you off balance, pause. Don't just try to survive the moment. Study it. Ask what it's revealing about your expectations, your identity, your attachments. Use it, because that's what a Stoic does. They don't avoid the fire. They walk through it and come out clearer, quieter, and far more dangerous in their calm. In the end, the strongest people aren't the ones who've avoided pain. They're the ones who've made peace with it, who've stitched it into their philosophy, who've let it deepen their understanding rather than narrow their heart. And that's the kind of clarity that can't be taken away, because it wasn't built in comfort. It was forged in the places most people run from. Most people react to life like it's happening in fast forward. They move from one event to the next, one decision to the next, barely pausing to examine the context or the consequences. Everything becomes immediate. Everything is urgent. But clarity doesn't live in urgency. It lives in depth. It lives in the ability to pause, take a breath, and ask not just what's happening right now, but what's beneath it, behind it, and beyond it. Clear thinking isn't about seeing more, it's about seeing through. When something happens, an insult, a failure, an opportunity, most people stop at the surface. They react to the moment, as if the moment is all that exists. But beneath that moment are layers. There's the emotional layer, how it feels. There's the social layer, how others might interpret it. There's the strategic layer, what it means tomorrow, next week, next year. And then there's the moral layer, how it aligns or conflicts with your values. Thinking with layered vision is the discipline of noticing all of it before you act. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." That's layered vision. It's seeing a rude comment not just as disrespect, but as a reflection of someone else's struggle, or a mirror for your own sensitivity. It's not overthinking, it's depth thinking. It's the refusal to let the obvious blind you to the subtle. Most people only ever see the obvious. We scroll through headlines and form opinions. We hear someone's tone and assume intent. We receive a message and immediately jump to conclusion. But the world is rarely that simple. The clearest thinkers are rarely the loudest or the fastest. They're the ones who've trained themselves to sit with complexity, to digest before deciding, to resist the urge for quick certainty. They're the ones who ask, "What am I not seeing here?" Slowing down is an act of rebellion in a world addicted to speed, and yet slowing down is the only way to actually see. To think clearly, you have to zoom out. You have to ask how this moment fits into the larger pattern. You have to recognize that every decision you make echoes. That silence today might protect your peace next week. That walking away now might create space for something more aligned later. That restraint in the moment might earn you deeper respect in the long run. People often mistake quickness for intelligence, but depth is what changes the game. Depth is what allows you to say, "I understand this situation," not just react to it. It gives you foresight. It gives you options. It gives you power that isn't loud or flashy, but stable. And that kind of power can't be taken easily because it wasn't built on impulse. Layered vision means training your mind to see consequences before they arrive. It means thinking not just about what someone did, but why they did it. Not just what the opportunity looks like now, but what it might become under pressure. Not just what you feel, but what created the feeling. And then asking if the reaction you're about to offer is in alignment with the person you're becoming. This kind of thinking takes practice. At first, it can feel unnatural. It can feel like overanalyzing, but over time, it becomes second nature. You start asking different questions. You stop being pulled into emotional traps. You notice patterns in people and situations faster. You learn to anticipate, to sense, to interpret. And most importantly, you learn to hold space between stimulus and response. That's where clarity lives, in the pause. When you think with layered vision, your actions become intentional. You stop falling into old loops. You don't just do what feels good, you do what's right. You don't just say what's easiest, you say what's necessary. You don't just pursue what's available, you pursue what's aligned. And suddenly, life starts to feel less chaotic, not because it's easier, but because you're no longer ruled by what's immediate. Imagine someone who insults you in public. A surface thinker reacts instantly: anger, defense, retaliation. But a layered thinker slows down. They see the insecurity in the insult. They see the people watching. They see the long-term cost of reacting emotionally. They see that silence here might earn them more respect than any clever comeback ever could. And so they choose differently, not because they're passive, but because they're aware of the deeper game. This isn't about being robotic. It's not about removing emotion from your decisions. It's about letting your emotions inform your actions, not control them. Emotions are valuable, but they're first drafts. Layered thinkers edit before they publish. They don't ignore their reactions. They examine them. They ask, where is this coming from? What else is true here? What's the wisest move? Not just the most satisfying one. Thinking with depth doesn't mean you'll always make the perfect choice, but it means your choices will be rooted, considered, and authentic. And that consistency is rare. In a world driven by reaction, the person who moves with calm clarity becomes magnetic, trusted, respected, not because they talk the most, but because when they speak, they've already listened. When they act, they've already thought. Layered vision is about becoming harder to manipulate. When you see through the surface, bait doesn't work. You don't rise to every provocation. You don't chase every opportunity. You don't panic when plans shift. You adjust. You recalibrate. You keep your vision intact. That's clarity, not the absence of challenge, but the refusal to be distorted by it. In the end, thinking clearly isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about knowing how to think, when to pause, what to question, and what to trust. And trust should be earned, especially when it comes to your own impulses. Don't just trust your first thought. Interrogate it. Don't just accept what's obvious. Question it. Don't just react. Reflect. This world will keep pulling you towards speed, noise, urgency. It will tempt you to respond quickly, decide hastily, move without thinking. But you can resist. You can pause. You can see. And in that seeing, you reclaim something rare: your depth, your ability to move through life with vision, not just motion. And that clarity changes everything. Most people walk through life with minds wide open, not in the enlightened sense, but in the vulnerable, unguarded way. Every voice is allowed in. Every comment gets a reaction. Every opinion becomes a weight on the scale. And before they even realize it, they're no longer thinking for themselves. Their mind has become public property, an open hallway for every passing belief, fear, and trend. But clarity, the kind that anchors you, steadies you, doesn't come from exposure. It comes from ownership. To own your mind is not to shut it off. It's not to block everything out and hide in isolation. It's to be discerning, selective, intentional. It means declaring, "This mind is mine, not for sale, not up for auction to the loudest influencer or the angriest comment or the fastest trend." And that kind of clarity, that's not passive. It's earned, it's enforced, it's lived. Because the world will try every single day to lease space in your head. And it's your job to decide what gets in and what never should have been allowed to begin with. You can feel when your mind doesn't belong to you. You become restless, reactive, easily swayed. Your opinions shift with the algorithm. Your self-worth gets tied to feedback loops. Your direction bends to whoever shouts the most convincing story. Suddenly, you're not living, you're being lived. You're not thinking, you're being thought through. And that erosion of self doesn't come with fireworks. It's quiet, subtle. It feels like compromise, like going along, like being open-minded. Until one day, you can't even hear your own voice through the noise. Clarity isn't just a mental state. It's a line in the sand, a boundary, a sacred refusal. It says, "No one gets to tell me who I am unless I agree." That doesn't mean you don't listen. It doesn't mean you ignore wisdom, but it means you don't absorb everything blindly. You don't let someone's urgency become your timeline. You don't let their judgment become your truth. You listen like a gatekeeper. You observe like a strategist. You decide with your own hands on the wheel. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And he was right. Because full ownership means taking responsibility for what your mind becomes. No more blaming others for confusion. No more pointing fingers at the culture or the critics or the noise. When your mind is yours, so is your clarity. And that's a weight most people avoid. It's easier to follow, easier to outsource. But clarity isn't ease, it's strength. And strength has a cost. A mind that isn't owned is always chasing approval, status, distraction. It's always running, never arriving. But when your mind belongs to you, something shifts. You stop flinching. You stop over-explaining. You stop rushing to justify every move. You move cleanly, deliberately. And in that steadiness, the world doesn't pull you off course. It watches you find your own. That kind of movement doesn't just influence people, it inspires them, because most have forgotten what it looks like to move from the inside out. You don't need everyone to understand you. You don't need the world to clap. You just need to be clear. Clear about your direction, clear about your values, clear about what thoughts belong in your inner sanctuary and which ones never make it past the gate. This isn't stubbornness, it's sovereignty. And in a world that profits from confusion, mental sovereignty is rebellion. It's saying, "I will not be another echo. I will not be another puppet for agendas I don't even understand. I will live by design, not default." And when you begin to live like this, distractions lose their grip. Manipulators lose their leverage. Approval stops tasting like oxygen. You're no longer performing, you're present. You're no longer guessing, you're grounded. Even in chaos, you can return to center because you've built one. Even in doubt, you can trust yourself because you've earned it. Not through perfection, but through the quiet practice of returning to your truth again and again, no matter how loud the world gets. Owning your mind also means learning to sit with silence, not the silence of disinterest, but the silence of strength, the ability to pause without panicking, to observe without reacting, to think without immediately announcing. That stillness is where clarity sharpens, where identity roots, where conviction forms. You don't owe the world your thoughts every time it demands them. Sometimes the clearest mind is the quietest in the room. When you guard your mental space, you stop treating every opinion like an emergency. Not every criticism needs a defense. Not every invitation needs a yes. Not every challenge is yours to fight. Owning your mind is knowing when to engage and when to walk away, when to speak and when to stay silent, when to wait and when to move with force. And that discernment, that's where clarity breathes, not in reacting to everything, but in responding to what matters. You'll still make mistakes. You'll still be wrong sometimes. But at least it'll be your mistake, your lesson, your growth. There is a dignity in that, a deep peace in knowing that even when things don't work out, you didn't betray yourself in the process. You didn't sell your attention to the highest bidder. You didn't move from fear or impulse or manipulation. You moved because you were clear. And if that clarity leads to pain, it also leads to freedom, and eventually to wisdom. The clearest thinkers aren't the ones with the most information. They're the ones with the strongest filters, the ones who've stopped letting everyone else narrate their life. The ones who've realized that confusion isn't just a lack of answers, it's an overload of noise. And once they cut through the noise, what's left isn't just silence, it's power. Clean, quiet, unshakable power. The kind that moves differently, the kind that doesn't ask for permission. So start drawing the line. Start listening for your voice underneath the world's expectations. Start asking, is this thought mine? Is this fear borrowed? Is this goal even real? You'll be surprised how many of your beliefs were never yours to begin with. How many of your doubts were planted by people who never wanted you to think for yourself. But the moment you reclaim your mind, you become dangerous in the best possible way. Not aggressive, not reactive, but centered, independent, clear. And clarity, once truly owned, doesn't ask for the world to follow. It simply walks and watches who keeps up. You were never meant to be a prisoner of noise. Your mind was built to be a sanctuary. Guard it like your life depends on it, because it does. The world doesn't reward the loudest voice or the kindest heart. It rewards the one who learns how to think clearly while others panic, the one who plans in silence while others chase noise. You don't rise by accident. You rise because you understand what moves people, and more importantly, what moves you. Strategy isn't just a skill, it's a way of seeing. It's recognizing that control doesn't begin with power over others. It begins with mastering the storm within. And that's where most people fail. Not because they're weak, but because they've never been taught how to build a mind that doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't fold. There's a reason the Stoics spoke so often of clarity, detachment, and self-discipline, because the battle is never truly outside you. It's always internal first. And if you can win there, if you can anchor yourself in reason when others drown in emotion, the rest of the world becomes a board you calmly navigate. If you're the kind of person who's done being pulled by chaos, who's ready to start designing a life with clarity, control, and purpose, then please subscribe for you, because every step forward is a quiet rebellion against everything trying to keep you small. True strategy doesn't shout. It doesn't beg for attention or announce itself with noise. It begins in the quiet corners of your mind, where no one is watching, where no one is praising you, where no one even knows you're working. That silence, the one most people are uncomfortable sitting with, is exactly where clarity begins to grow. When you allow yourself to sit still, to observe without needing to react, you begin to see what others miss. Most people spend their lives trying to be seen, trying to be heard, rushing to act without knowing why. But the strategist moves differently. You don't act just because something triggers you. You pause, you examine, you wait until the truth reveals itself, not through noise, but through pattern. And in a world that moves too fast to think, the one who slows down becomes the one who controls the pace of everything else. You don't just react to what life throws at you. You study it. You study people, their words, their habits, their inconsistencies, and in doing so, you start to understand them better than they understand themselves. Power isn't always about force. Sometimes it's about becoming so aware that your very presence unsettles people because they know you see what they're trying to hide. But this kind of perception doesn't come from rushing or from noise. It's built in the dark, in the quiet, when you're sitting with your thoughts while everyone else is busy distracting themselves. That's the blueprint. The world wants you loud and impulsive. But real control comes from being the one person who knows exactly when to speak and when to stay silent. And when you begin to train your mind this way, you stop wasting energy on things that don't matter. You stop responding to every opinion, every provocation, every minor inconvenience, because you realize what deserves your attention is rare. What requires a response is even rarer. The strategist understands this. They know that not everything is worth addressing, not every battle is worth fighting. Because when your mind is clear, you don't just see the fight in front of you, you see 5 moves ahead. You think like a sculptor, not a brawler. Every word, every gesture, every decision is deliberate. You're not in the game to play harder, you're here to play smarter. There's a quiet kind of power that comes from knowing your next 10 moves before you make the first one. It makes you calm, because nothing surprises you. It makes you disciplined, because you don't need to prove anything. It makes you feared, because people can't predict you. They can't rattle you. They don't know what you're thinking, and that unknown becomes your shield. And when you move, it's not rushed, it's precise. Like the way a storm gathers before it strikes, silent but certain. You don't chase momentum, you build it. You don't grab at power, you design it. This design begins within, not with domination over others, but with mastery over your own impulses, fears, and distractions. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." That calm doesn't appear magically. It's forged through discipline. It's the result of countless moments when you chose to think instead of speak, to wait instead of rush, to watch instead of react. And when you live that way long enough, you start to feel a shift. You're not the same person anymore. You're not trying to keep up. You're deciding the pace. You're not trying to impress. You're focused on impact. Most people want control, but they've never taken the time to study what control really is. It's not the loudest person in the room. It's the one who understands what everyone else is missing. The one who knows what motivates people, what scares them, what they'll deny. And to get there, you have to be willing to spend time in that mental space no one else wants to visit, where nothing is certain, where patience is tested, where silence is your only companion. But if you can stay there long enough, something changes. You start to see the world less emotionally, more structurally, less about what should be and more about what is. You trade comfort for vision. And in that exchange, you gain something few ever will: command of your own reality. Carl Jung once said, "In all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order." The strategist is the one who sees that order, not just outside, but inside themselves. They don't ignore chaos, they decipher it. They don't run from confusion, they translate it. And through that process, they sharpen their awareness like a blade. Eventually, you reach a place where your calm becomes unsettling to others, where your ability to stay grounded when others panic becomes your leverage. That's not arrogance, that's earned composure. You begin to trust your instincts, not because they're wild guesses, but because they've been trained in solitude, in repetition, in failure, and in study. You're not chasing certainty anymore. You've built it within, and from that foundation, you operate. Every move you make carries weight, not because it's loud, but because it's intentional. And in a world built on distraction, the person who moves with intention becomes a force. Not because they're feared, but because they are respected. Not because they dominate others, but because they've mastered themselves. That's what the silent blueprint of power really is. It's not a checklist, it's not a tactic. It's a way of seeing, a way of being, a way of training your mind to function in a world that wants you emotional, impulsive, and lost. But you're not here to be swept away by the noise. You're here to be the one who sees clearly, acts wisely, and builds slowly. Because when your foundation is rooted in silence, in strategy, in deep understanding, you don't need to shout to be heard. Your presence speaks long before your words ever do. Emotion is loud. It rises like a wave, fast, overwhelming, and urgent. It demands a response, pushes for immediate action, insists that something be said, something be done. But that urgency is not truth. It's not clarity. It's a test. And those who don't recognize that are constantly led by what they feel instead of what they know. The strategist, the warrior, they understand this difference. They feel the same storm that others do. They just don't become it. They don't let the noise dictate the movement, because power doesn't lie in having no emotion. It lies in having the discipline not to be ruled by it. To live strategically is to walk into every situation already aware that emotion will try to hijack you. It will try to blur your vision, rush your choices, cloud your judgment. That's why preparation matters. That's why stillness is practiced, so that when emotion shows up, it finds no seat at the table. You acknowledge it, you don't deny it, but you never hand it the reins. Because the moment you do, your power becomes scattered. You lose the ability to see clearly. You forget what the long game looks like. And in the space where you should be moving with purpose, you're reacting with confusion. The Stoics never claimed to be unfeeling. They never sought to cut out the heart. What they mastered was the ability to choose which feelings deserved action. You may not control what triggers the emotion, but you always control what you do with it. If someone insults you, you don't need to respond. If a situation feels tense, you don't need to force clarity. If fear shows up, you don't need to run. The disciplined mind knows when to act and when to sit still. And sometimes, silence is the most strategic response you can offer. People often think strength looks like force, like intensity, but the strongest people you'll ever meet are the ones who look calm in chaos. They're the ones who don't argue just to defend themselves. They don't explain themselves just to feel understood. They don't perform to prove their worth. They move with such clarity that explanation becomes unnecessary. That kind of presence doesn't come from ego. It comes from emotional control. When you no longer seek to escape the discomfort of feeling, you become unshakable. You can look someone in the eye while your heart is racing and still speak with precision. You can feel insulted and still choose to hold your ground without retaliation. You can be scared and still move forward with intention. You've probably experienced it yourself. The moment you snapped and regretted it, the time you rushed into something because you were afraid to wait, the apology you made after realizing you acted out of emotion, not reason. Those aren't failures, they're lessons, and they point to something important. That power without emotional discipline is unstable. It wobbles, it leaks. But when you begin to practice this awareness, when you start catching your reactions, noticing your triggers, sitting with your discomfort, you start to reclaim control, not just over situations, but over yourself. And once you do that, everything changes. Conversations slow down, reactions feel optional. You become aware of the energy in the room, but not swallowed by it. You see people trying to provoke you, and instead of getting drawn in, you observe. You watch the patterns. You collect information. And then when the time is right, you move. not from emotion, but from clarity. That movement hits different. It doesn't just get a result, it earns respect. Because everyone else is still caught in the tide of their feelings, and you've already stepped onto solid ground. This doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop being your feelings. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." When your emotions are unconscious, unexamined and unchecked, you end up building your life around them. You choose partners based on fear of being alone. You take jobs based on fear of failure. You argue because of pride, withdraw because of shame, run because of guilt. But when you bring them into the light, when you study what they're saying, when you understand where they come from, they stop leading, they start informing, and from there you can build something solid. Epictetus taught, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That truth is timeless, because no matter how chaotic the world becomes, no matter how unpredictable people can be, your power begins the moment you choose your reaction. That choice is your edge. That discipline is your freedom. And once you've built that within, no one can take it from you. Not their opinions, not their approval, not their attacks. You move through the world like someone who knows what they're doing, someone who doesn't flinch, someone who sees clearly. And when others lose their balance, you remain centered, because you've trained for this, not in fire, but in stillness, not in panic, but in discipline. And that kind of strength doesn't fade, it deepens, it sharpens, it becomes who you are. People often confuse chaos with power. They see loudness, quick reactions, big movements, and assume there must be strength behind them. But that's not strength, it's noise. And noise is what the world trains you to respond to. But the warrior knows better. Real power doesn't come from how much space you take up. It comes from how still you can remain when everything around you tries to shake you. There's something deeply unnerving about the kind of person who doesn't flinch, someone who can sit in discomfort, in tension, and not be moved unless they decide to move. That's not passivity, that's command. You see it sometimes, people who walk into a room and instantly alter the energy without saying a word. It's not because they're intimidating, it's because their calm is loud. It sends a message that says, "I am not here to be swayed, I am here to stay centered." And that kind of energy pulls attention without asking for it. Most people think being a warrior is about how hard you hit, but it's really about how stable you remain. It's about training your presence to be so still, so grounded, that others instinctively second-guess any attempt to challenge it. Because they feel what you've mastered internally, even before you speak. And this isn't something you inherit, it's something you build through discipline, through hardship, through choosing again and again not to be baited into reaction. It's easy to yell, easy to respond, easy to get pulled into every battle you're invited to. But the warrior's calm is built in the decision to let 10 provocations pass without engaging, because you know not every conflict deserves your attention. You don't just protect your peace, you weaponize it. You let it create uncertainty in others. They can't tell what you're thinking, they can't read your face, they can't pull you out of position, and that unreadability becomes your shield. Stoicism isn't about suppression, it's about expression through discipline. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." That's what the warrior's calm recognizes. The situation is never what breaks you, it's how you internalize it. And once you understand that, you stop being reactive to every sharp word, every delay, every misunderstanding. You start observing instead of absorbing, and from that place, your actions become sharper, cleaner, more impactful, because they're not cluttered by confusion or ego. A true warrior knows that real strength lies in precision, not performance, and when your internal state is calm, your movements become deliberate. You don't overextend, you don't rush. You wait for the right moment, and when it comes, you don't hesitate. That's the difference between dominance and desperation. Desperation moves frantically. Dominance moves with timing. Calm allows you to see that timing. It gives you the clarity to strike once, cleanly, and walk away without the need to prove anything further. Carl Jung once said, "Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness." The word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. That's a reminder that calm doesn't mean blind optimism or emotional detachment. It means balance. It means being aware of what you feel but not enslaved by it. It means knowing the darkness exists, but not letting it define your identity. The warrior's calm is not about pretending bad things don't happen. It's about knowing you will not be broken by them when they do. There's a kind of psychological gravity that forms when you walk through life without the constant need to explain, defend, or impress. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you've chosen what to care about. It means your time and energy are not freely available. They're earned. That energy, when others sense it, makes them pause. It creates distance, not because you're pushing people away, but because your energy communicates boundaries. And those boundaries, rooted in calm, demand respect without saying a word. Aristotle believed that excellence is a habit, not an act. And that's exactly what the warrior's calm becomes, a habit, a daily choice to remain grounded in a world addicted to noise. When others are rushing to react, you are breathing deeply. When the moment heats up, you cool it down, not for show, but because you know that your strength doesn't need to be loud to be real. The discipline it takes to stay calm in high-pressure moments is one of the rarest forms of mastery. And when you carry it long enough, it stops being something you have to think about. It becomes who you are. Imagine how much energy you could save by not being pulled into every emotional current. Imagine how many mistakes you could avoid if you just paused, breathed, and responded when you were ready, not when your feelings told you to. That's the advantage. And over time, it compounds. You become more efficient, more respected, more trusted, because people know you won't spiral, you won't overreact, you'll think, you'll listen, and when you do speak, it matters. Seneca wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Calm is not the absence of adversity, it's proof that you've learned how to face it without folding. And that proof becomes your presence. It becomes the thing people notice before you even speak. It becomes the reason people trust you in chaos and look to you in crisis. So when you carry calm, don't second-guess it. Don't shrink it to make others more comfortable. Understand what it communicates, understand what it protects, and understand what it builds. The world doesn't need more reaction. It needs more reflection. It needs people who can stand in the fire and not become it. People who can feel the weight of conflict and still walk with grace. That's the warrior. Not the loudest one in the room, but the most grounded. The one who walks with silence and leaves others echoing in the space they no longer control. There's a reason the most powerful minds in history withdrew before they moved. Because clarity doesn't come from noise, it comes from stillness. And in a world where everyone is trying to be seen, to be heard, to be validated, stepping away feels unnatural. But that's exactly why it works. Intentional isolation isn't about running from the world. It's about rising above its distractions. It's a deliberate pause, a conscious separation from everything pulling at your attention, so you can finally hear your own thoughts again. You don't find vision in the crowd. You find compromise. You don't find yourself surrounded by constant voices. You lose yourself trying to match them. But when you step away, not out of rejection but out of purpose, something shifts. Your vision sharpens, your mind calms, and suddenly everything you were chasing begins to come into focus. Isolation is not emptiness, it's refinement. You don't need to constantly announce your progress. You don't need to document every step or share every win. Some things grow best in silence. Some victories are sharpened in shadows. And the person who learns to thrive in solitude learns to stop relying on validation. They begin to generate momentum from within. That's real independence. Not just doing things on your own, but becoming someone who doesn't need the world to tell them who they are. Solitude teaches you to be your own source of focus, motivation, and truth. And once you've tasted that kind of power, you stop seeking approval from people who don't even know where they're going. Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that kind of becoming doesn't happen in crowds. It doesn't happen in noise. It happens when you walk away long enough to remember what matters. And in that quiet space, you begin to separate yourself from the chaos of the world. Not because you're better, but because you're building something deeper. When everyone is busy reacting, you're still. When everyone's lost in trends, you're returning to principle. When everyone's looking outward, you're turning inward, not to escape, but to sharpen. You train your focus like a blade. You learn to protect it. You learn to direct it. And eventually it becomes so sharp, so intentional, that nothing unnecessary can survive your attention anymore. Solitude is the architect of depth. It's the place where shallow goals die and meaningful ones are born. You stop chasing things just because others are chasing them. You stop accepting the life handed to you by the crowd and start crafting the life you actually want. There's power in that. There's peace in that. And there's responsibility in that too, because once you know your values, once you've clarified your vision, you can't pretend you don't. The silence leaves no excuses. It hands you yourself. And you either accept that challenge or you return to the noise hoping to forget. But the one who stays with it, who wrestles with the solitude, begins to build a life that can't be shaken by opinions, distractions, or temporary discomfort. Intentional isolation also trains resilience, because when you stop depending on others for stimulation, for direction, for permission, you build the kind of mental strength that doesn't crumble when you're ignored, misunderstood, or underestimated. You don't panic when things go quiet. You use that silence. You create in it. You rise in it. The world teaches you to fear being alone because isolation threatens everything superficial. But solitude, when chosen, becomes your advantage. It's the difference between reacting emotionally and responding strategically. It's the shift from external performance to internal alignment. And in that alignment, your pace changes, your standards rise, your vision extends beyond the moment. Seneca once said, "If you want to be loved, love yourself first." That begins in solitude. That begins when you're willing to sit with your own mind long enough to understand its strengths and challenge its weaknesses. When you do that, when you face yourself fully, the world stops being so loud. You see through it. You start noticing how much of it is distraction wrapped in urgency. And when you have clarity, you stop being manipulated by appearances. You stop engaging in meaningless battles. You conserve your energy. You refine your circle. And you learn to create without applause. Isolation teaches you to become selective about people, ideas, inputs, and energy. You stop allowing chaos into your world just because it's common. You stop responding to people who haven't earned your attention, and you stop sacrificing your values just to feel included. That inclusion, if it requires you to shrink, is not worth it. Because once you've experienced what it feels like to be at peace with yourself, no crowd can replace it. You realize that solitude isn't a weakness, it's a filter. It shows you who you are without the noise of the world shaping your identity. It shows you which goals are truly yours, and it gives you the space to pursue them with precision. Epictetus reminds us, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. And what is freedom really, if not the ability to be alone and unshaken, to not fear your own mind, to not need the opinions of others to validate your truth, to be so grounded in who you are that silence isn't empty, it's productive. That's what intentional isolation gives you. Not distance from life, but depth within it. Not withdrawal from others, but reconnection with yourself. And once you learn how to cultivate it, you stop fearing loneliness, because you're never really alone when you've made peace with your own presence. So step away, not to vanish, but to remember, not to escape, but to rebuild. Because when you return with something rare, clarity. And clarity cuts through the noise. It speaks without shouting. It moves without hesitation. It leads without needing to follow. The strategist knows this. The warrior lives it. And the one who trains in silence walks into any room already holding the advantage. Detachment isn't the absence of feeling. It's the mastery of feeling. It's not that you don't care. It's that you no longer let what you care about control you. There's a quiet power in being able to stand still while everything around you tries to pull at your identity, your attention, your worth. Detachment doesn't mean walking away from life. It means walking through it with clarity. You stop chasing because you start realizing how little of what you thought you needed actually defines who you are. And the moment you stop trying to grip everything tightly, you stop losing yourself in the process. There's a kind of peace that only comes when you stop trying to manage everything outside of you. That peace doesn't come from pretending not to care. It comes from being so deeply rooted in who you are that no rejection, no distance, no silence can unmake you. You still love, you still give, you still feel. But you stop depending on the outcome. You don't ask others to complete you. You don't need them to agree with you. You don't collapse when they leave, because you've stopped placing your sense of self in their hands. That is detachment, not because you don't value connection, but because you finally learned how to connect without losing yourself. Seneca said, "He is most powerful who has power over himself." Detachment is that power. It allows you to walk away from chaos without explanation. It allows you to feel desire without becoming desperate. It allows you to enjoy what you have without fearing its loss. And that's rare, because most people live from a place of clinging to people who don't respect them, clinging to roles they've outgrown, clinging to outcomes that were never in their control to begin with. They call it loyalty or passion or commitment. But really, it's fear. Fear of being alone, fear of not being enough, fear of not being seen. But when you start to practice detachment, those fears begin to fade. Because you stop seeing loss as a reflection of your value. You stop giving weight to the opinions of people who haven't earned your vulnerability. You begin to understand that what stays will stay, and what leaves was never truly aligned. You become patient with change. You stop demanding closure. You stop forcing clarity. You let life unfold without trying to squeeze it into your expectations. That doesn't make you indifferent. It makes you wise. And wisdom, by nature, is quiet. It doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It doesn't attach itself to everything that feels good in the moment. It waits. It watches. It allows. And from that stillness, it decides. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists." That's exactly why detachment matters. The more tightly you hold on, the more power you give away. The more you try to control people, outcomes, or timing, the more you suffer. But when you loosen your grip, when you breathe and allow, you create space for growth, for truth, for freedom. Detachment gives you freedom because it removes your dependence on outcomes. And without that dependence, you begin to act from a place of clarity instead of fear. You stop manipulating. You stop trying to win people over. You stop performing just to be chosen. You speak your truth, not to convince, but to express. You show up, not to impress, but to be real. And if that's not enough for someone, you don't bend. You bless their path and keep walking. That's strength, not because it's easy, but because it's clean. It comes from a place of knowing that peace isn't something someone else gives you. It's something you stop giving away. You become lighter when you detach. You stop carrying expectations that were never yours to begin with. You stop chasing what's running from you. You stop needing constant reassurance to feel secure. And what's left is a life that's quiet, steady, rooted. A life where your value isn't a question, where your joy isn't dependent on attention, where your energy isn't drained by things that no longer serve your evolution. That's what detachment builds. Not isolation, not indifference, but sovereignty. You become emotionally self-sufficient, not so you can walk alone, but so that you can walk with others without losing your path. And here's the paradox. The less you need, the more you attract, because the world is drawn to people who don't chase. There's gravity in emotional independence. There's intrigue in calm confidence. There's power in someone who loves fully, gives freely, and yet holds nothing too tightly. That energy doesn't beg, it doesn't prove, it just is. And that kind of presence reshapes the room. It speaks louder than words, because it isn't trying to be loud. It's simply aligned. Marcus Aurelius said, "Receive without pride, let go without attachment." That's what detachment teaches you: to love without owning, to give without expecting, to live without clinging. And in that space, everything becomes clearer. The people who stay feel lighter. The goals you pursue feel cleaner. The life you build feels truer. Because it's not built on trying to hold everything in place. It's built on trust. Trust that you can handle loss. Trust that you can survive change. Trust that you don't need everything to go your way in order to be okay. And when you carry that trust long enough, you become someone others can trust too. Because they sense it. They feel the steadiness in your presence. They recognize the difference between someone who is whole and someone who is still looking to be filled. And it's not about superiority, it's about responsibility. You stop asking others to regulate your emotions. You stop handing over your peace for temporary pleasure. And you stop treating relationships as lifeboats. You're no longer sinking, you're swimming. The truth is, detachment gives you back to yourself, and when you live from that place, everything around you starts to align with who you truly are, not who you've been trying to be to make others stay. You stop needing the story to go a certain way. You stop needing closure from people who couldn't offer it. You stop needing to be understood in order to understand yourself. And what remains is strength, not the kind that flexes, but the kind that holds steady when the rest of the world moves like a tide. Because when you are no longer moved by every wave, you become the current. You don't resist life. You move with it from a place of freedom, from a place of presence, from a place that cannot be shaken by what comes or what goes. And that is the quiet, grounded, untouchable strength of true detachment. Control isn't about dominance. It's not about barking orders or bending others to your will. It's about discipline, quiet, deliberate discipline that starts from the inside and expands outward. That's the part most people miss. They try to control everything around them, the pace of their career, the behavior of others, the outcomes of situations. But when something doesn't go their way, even something small, they spiral. Their emotions explode, their focus vanishes, their words betray them. And that's the contradiction. You can't command anything outside of you until you've mastered what's going on within you. If you can't control your tongue in anger, your attention under pressure, or your emotions when you're tested, then what are you really in control of? Control begins not with what you do, but with how you think. It's about what you allow into your mind and what you allow your mind to do with it. Most people run on reaction. They hear something and immediately respond. They feel discomfort and instantly try to escape it. But control means space. Space between the stimulus and the response. Space where reflection happens, where choice is made. That space is power, and most never find it because they're too used to moving without thinking. But once you begin to cultivate that space, by slowing down, observing, pausing, your decisions shift. Your actions become intentional. Your energy becomes more focused and less scattered. You become someone who moves because it's time, not because something provoked you. Think about how many times you've reacted and regretted it. How many times your mouth moved faster than your mind. How many times you gave away your energy just because someone pushed the right button. That's what emotional control protects you from. It's not about shutting down your feelings, it's about guiding them. It's about being aware of your state and refusing to be hijacked by it. And that applies to everything: anger, anxiety, impatience, even excitement. You learn to manage your highs the same way you manage your lows, because consistency is what builds trust, not just with others, but with yourself. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's not just a quote to admire, it's a standard to live by. Because when your mind becomes your ally instead of your master, the rest of your life starts aligning with purpose. You begin to reclaim time that used to be lost to distractions. You begin to protect energy that used to be wasted on drama. You begin to silence thoughts that used to scream for attention, and people notice. They may not understand it, but they feel it. They sense that you're not easily moved, that you think before you speak, that you act when others would react. And in a world addicted to chaos, that kind of stability becomes magnetic. Control also means knowing when not to act. That's the part that separates the wise from the impulsive, because there are moments when saying nothing is the highest form of intelligence, when walking away is the strongest form of resistance, when pausing is the most powerful move on the board. The world will test you constantly. It will poke at your insecurities, tempt your ego, challenge your boundaries. And every time you respond from a place of grounded control, you rise above the test. Not because you won, but because you didn't lose yourself in the process. Control isn't loud. It doesn't draw attention to itself. It's not the person pounding on the table or barking instructions. Real control is subtle. It's the one who speaks last, listens most, and doesn't reveal everything. It's the one who walks into a room without needing to prove a thing, because they know who they are. They've trained for stillness. And that kind of quiet control makes people curious. It makes them uncomfortable, because they realize they can't predict you, they can't provoke you, they can't pull you into the current they're stuck in. That kind of detachment, anchored in self-mastery, is not just rare, it's powerful. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And that's what we all want in some form. Freedom. Freedom from our triggers, freedom from old habits, freedom from the constant pull of everything outside us. But freedom doesn't come from avoidance. It comes from engagement, from noticing your impulses and choosing not to obey them, from watching your thoughts and letting some of them pass without turning them into action, from choosing the long term over the short term, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. And here's the truth: control takes time. You don't wake up grounded. You build it, day by day, thought by thought, reaction by reaction. You'll mess up. You'll say things you didn't mean. You'll fall back into old habits. But every time you catch yourself, you grow. Every time you reflect, you realign. Every time you return to yourself after losing control, you make that return faster. And over time, that becomes your baseline. Not perfection, but awareness. Not emotionlessness, but steadiness. When you control your attention, you control your mind. When you control your mind, you control your energy. And when you control your energy, you control your life. That's the chain. That's the foundation. Not controlling others, not manipulating outcomes, but mastering the one thing that's always been yours, your own state. Because once you build control within, no one can take it from you. They can try to disturb your peace, but they won't succeed. They can try to provoke you, but they'll only be met with silence. They can try to define you, but they'll only end up revealing themselves. And that's when you know you've won. Not when you've defeated others, but when you've risen above the need to. Control isn't about holding tight. It's about letting go of what doesn't serve you. It's about protecting what matters. It's about moving with precision, not pressure. And when you live that way long enough, you stop reacting to the world and start shaping it. You stop being a product of chaos and start becoming the architect of order. That's what control is. Not force, not fear, just quiet power that begins with you and extends into everything you touch. Most people wait for change to force their hand. They wait until things collapse, until time runs out, until there's no other option but to adjust. But by then, the advantage is gone. The true strategist doesn't wait for chaos to arrive. They anticipate it. They watch patterns. They read the undercurrents. They train their mind to bend before the pressure demands it. Because they know that adaptation isn't about reaction, it's about design. And when you learn to design your response before the world demands it, you move with a kind of quiet speed that's hard to track and impossible to stop. Adaptation isn't noise. It isn't frantic or dramatic. It's internal first. It's the conversation you have with yourself when things shift unexpectedly and you choose not to panic, but to adjust. You don't betray who you are. You sharpen who you are. You evolve the form, not the foundation. And that's the difference between those who remain solid under pressure and those who shatter. The untrained mind resists change and calls it loyalty. The strategist embraces change and calls it intelligence. Because staying the same in a world that constantly moves is not strength. It's denial. And denial is what blinds people to opportunity until it passes them by. There's a natural fear that comes with change. That's human. But fear is only dangerous when it becomes resistance. When you believe you're losing yourself by evolving, when you think every adjustment is a compromise, that's when growth dies. But the truth is, you don't abandon your values when you adapt. You express them more effectively. You stop clinging to methods that no longer work. You stop worshipping outdated identities. You stop performing patterns that no longer align with who you've become. Adapting means updating yourself, not to impress the world, but to move through it more wisely. Seneca once said, "Fate leads the willing and drags along the reluctant." And that's the essence of this. If you resist the natural flow of change, you get dragged by it. You break under it. You suffer through it. But if you meet it willingly, if you accept that change is not the enemy but the next teacher, you begin to harness it. You use it. You stay ahead of it. You stop waiting for the world to decide your next move. You choose it yourself. That's not weakness. That's strategic strength. the kind that survives what others crumble under. Adaptation also requires self-honesty, brutal honesty. You can't evolve if you're still pretending the old way is working. You can't shift if your ego is too attached to how things used to be. That's where most people get stuck. Not because they don't have the capacity to change, but because they've tied their worth to outdated methods, fading relationships, past versions of themselves. And letting go feels like failure. But it isn't. It's clarity. It's realigning your path with where you're going, not where you've been. And if you can do that, if you can let go of what no longer fits, you make space for something that does. Carl Jung once wrote, "What did you do as a child that made the hours pass like minutes? Therein lies the key to your earthly pursuits." That's a question that invites you to reconnect with the raw, changing energy of who you were before the world told you how to behave. That's where adaptability begins, not in the mind that's been trained to fear change, but in the spirit that once moved freely. To reclaim that, you have to strip away the conditioning that says security comes from sameness. You have to remember that your spirit was always evolving, always experimenting, always becoming. Returning to that state, not childish but fluid, is how you begin to trust your ability to transform. The more you practice adaptation, the less attached you become to being right. You stop needing to defend old views. You start seeking better ones. You stop fearing being misunderstood. You start valuing accuracy over comfort. That doesn't mean you're inconsistent. It means you're honest. Honest enough to say, what worked before might not work now. And that honesty opens doors. It pulls you into environments, relationships, ideas that are better suited for who you're becoming. It doesn't mean the old was wrong. It means it's done, and you're ready for what's next. Plato once said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." Adaptation gives you power because it gives you choice. You're no longer trapped in one way of thinking, one way of living, one way of responding. You have options. You have range. You become someone who can walk into any environment and adjust, not to blend in, but to be effective. That's what survival looks like when it's infused with strategy. You don't just last. You lead. Quietly, precisely, powerfully. And there's a freedom in this kind of movement. You're no longer boxed in by who you were last year, last month, or even yesterday. You don't cling to consistency for the sake of identity. You hold values, not masks. You walk with truth, not outdated roles. You move with intent, not habit. And as a result, you remain alive, fully alive, in a world that rewards sleepwalkers and punishes change. But you don't shrink to fit what's fading. You expand to meet what's coming. Adaptation is not betrayal. It's clarity in motion. It's the kind of strength that doesn't need to announce itself. The kind of intelligence that speaks in action, not explanation. And the more you live this way, the more you realize survival is not about clinging to what was. It's about stepping into what's needed, fully, freely, without fear. That's not just how you stay in the game. That's how you write your own rules. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It enters quietly, fully formed, fully centered, and everything else adjusts around it. That's the energy of someone who's done the work, the deep, internal work of self-mastery, not for show, but for truth. A king doesn't need to be loud because he's already aligned with something greater than ego. His movements are minimal because his presence is complete. He doesn't win by overpowering others. He wins by overpowering the chaos within himself first. And from that internal architecture, a structure so calm and so precise, everything else begins to respond in kind. People often think victory looks like noise. They imagine it's about outshouting, outshining, outperforming. But that's just effort without direction. That's motion without control. True victory is still. It's efficient, it's clean, and when you witness it, you feel it before you see it, because the strongest minds don't need to explain themselves. They operate with a rhythm that doesn't ask for permission or approval. It just moves, on time, on purpose, untouched. That's the final ascent. When you no longer chase validation, when you stop needing recognition, when you build such a clear internal compass that you move through life not louder, but sharper. This ascent isn't a performance. It's not theatrical. It's quiet revolution. It's the decision to lead with discipline, to execute without applause, and to hold your line without seeking validation. You don't need a crowd to feel complete. You don't need opposition to feel strong. You've already made peace with your solitude. You've already mastered your silence. And now, you don't show up to prove anything. You show up because your very existence is a result of relentless refinement. There's nothing left to shout about when you've become the living embodiment of focus. To win without noise means you don't let the world pull you off rhythm. You don't respond to bait. You don't engage with what's beneath your discipline. You observe it. You calculate. And when you act, you do so with such intention that it feels inevitable. You're no longer reactive. You are architectural. You design your responses. You place your time with purpose. And you value your energy like a rare currency. You've learned that not everything needs your effort, your explanation, or your reaction, because silence, when rooted in clarity, is more powerful than 1,000 words misused in haste. Seneca wrote, "The greatest blessings of mankind are within us and within our reach, and that's exactly why this level of power is so rare. Most people are too distracted to reach for it, too scattered, too invested in external noise to ever build the kind of order that commands attention in silence. But you've chosen something different. You've chosen presence over performance. And now you're no longer shaped by the world. You shape the space you walk into, not because you dominate it, but because you no longer need to compete with it." That shift, from needing attention to commanding it without trying, marks a change few ever reach. It means your power is no longer dependent on outcome. It's not built on whether you win today or tomorrow. It's built on how you move, how you think, how you endure. Your presence carries the weight of every choice you've made in silence, every time you turned away from distraction, every moment you chose stillness over spectacle. And that accumulation, those quiet, consistent investments in who you are, create a magnetic force that others feel, even if they don't understand it. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." And that's what this level of living is. It's the awakened state, the one where you're no longer dreaming about power, you're embodying it. Not because you took it from someone else, but because you claimed what was always yours, your focus, your presence, your control. This is the kind of awakening that doesn't make noise, but it changes the atmosphere, the kind that shifts the temperature of a room without saying a word. Because what's built in silence echoes louder than anything shouted in haste. To win like a king is to lead yourself first. Before you influence anyone else, you've held yourself to a higher standard. You've learned how to delay gratification, how to manage your emotions, how to stay composed when the weak would explode. You've chosen strategy over comfort, purpose over popularity, and you've built the kind of resilience that doesn't break under pressure. It calibrates. You've become a mirror to the untrained. They see your stillness and wonder how you're not shaken. They feel your detachment and question their own need for noise. That's the beauty of quiet power. It reflects back everything others haven't yet mastered in themselves. This final ascent isn't about reaching a peak where nothing challenges you. It's about becoming someone who moves so well under pressure that challenges just feel like puzzles, not battles. You no longer fight your way through life. You navigate it. You design your moves in silence. And when the world tries to disrupt your pace, you stay grounded. Not because it's easy, but because you've trained for it. You've stripped away the unnecessary. You've outgrown the noise, and now your life is shaped by discipline, not reaction, by design, not demand. And so you walk differently, not faster, not louder, but clearer. You've made the quiet your strength. You've made stillness your advantage. And now the world doesn't question your value. It adjusts to it, not because you asked, but because you became undeniable. That's how you win without noise. That's how you lead without force. That's how you rise without needing to be seen rising. This is not the path of ease, but it is the path of kings, quiet, steady, sharp, and absolutely unshakable. You don't need to raise your voice when your presence already speaks. You don't need to prove yourself when your discipline has already built the proof. The world bends quietly for those who master themselves first. So walk with clarity, move with calm, and let your silence carry the weight of everything you've become. Watch one of the videos on your screen to keep sharpening the mind that cannot be moved. And thank you, truly, for being a part of Stoic Journal.